His head was pounding as he got up, the feeling of his minds being pushed to their limits sticking with him despite how powerful they now were as he took a moment to try and let the feeling pass. Even if that intense bit of study had been good for his knowledge skills, it still felt like too much. And only weeks more to go. He tried to shake that depressing thought from his head as he went to make breakfast, his God whispering in his ear the entire time. As sad as it is, this is already the most viable project I've got going. Making Inixabati is going to be hard enough when I still can't make legendary items. The summoning spell is just waiting for my new employees to be, and as much as I want to plunge the secrets of the archive, that one is so low on the list I basically don't care about it right now. Sounds good. Things will probably be fine. Morning. Thera yawned out as she came up behind him, resting a head on his shoulder as he finished cooking. How'd your talk with your God go? Good. I'll tell you and Sonia about it tonight if that sounds good. MMH, you know I don't like waiting. It's for my own safety. I still need to work out how I'm going to tell you both about the finer details of what I'm thinking. Ha! I just need to work a bit more out is all. Are you going to the clinic today or flying around? Flying. Auntie should have things well enough in hand here with the other staff to help. If I just do everything then the others won't get their practice, so it's better for me to check out the surrounding towns. Okay, cool. There's actually something related to that I want your help with if you don't mind? Sure. What's up? I kind of have this new thing I want to try, but first I need to raise someone's level. After giving Thera a small bit of an explanation and eating, the two of them left, driving through town under Myriad's directions to get to the home of his fellow believer and banging on the door until a very tired Sakhel answered. Morning. What are you two doing here? She asked, clearly only up because of Ben's persistent knocking and rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Rise and shine. What level is your life magic right now? 6. Why? And how long has it been at 6? He asked, ignoring her question. I don't know, a couple years at this point. Cool, you're coming with us today, and tomorrow, and every day till you raise it. Wait, what are you talking about? Why? To make a long story short, because I'm a wonderful apostle who's going to do his absolute best to help you achieve your dream of awakening to plant magic. But to do what I'm thinking I need you to get to level 7 from practicing, hence this. That was enough to make every trace of sleepiness vanish from her eyes, only to be replaced with sheer excitement. You have an idea to help me awaken my skills? I do. And no, I'm not telling you anymore until you've shown that you have the drive to get to the 7th level of your life magic. Mostly because I'm hoping by then you'll be too invested to say no to the admittedly insane thing we're going to need to do to get you to the 8th level. He didn't need to say anything else. In a flash, she was saying goodbye to Raelia, giving a quick explanation to her that she might not be able to hunt for a while and to pass that along to Sko before running out to face whatever the day was going to hold. Okay, that was not great, Sakhel groaned as Thera brought the cart to the ground. How can you handle it? I don't, Ben muttered back as Thera shook her head. You're both being silly. It's exhilarating once you get used to it. Now come on. Their first stop was to Stonewall's neighboring town. A smaller place than their own, but still in need of healers like so many others. It seemed they were a welcome sight too, getting plenty of positive looks as they made their way through the streets before arriving at the local clinic where Thera made her presence known. Hello. I'm back again if you all need any assistance, she called out as the healers around locked eyes on her. Thera, so wonderful to have you as always. We could absolutely use the help, one said before looking at Ben and Sakhel. And you brought guests? One of them also needs to work on their life magic. I hope you don't mind? More hands are always a blessing. I'm sure you know your way around now, so we'll take whatever you can give. She gave the healer a bright smile and went in, the two of them following her as she looked to the various patients waiting for any healer to have the time and mana to either treat them or finish up treatment depending on what needed to be done. From the way more eyes locked onto her, it was obvious that many knew who she was and she had their trust, getting more hopeful looks than she ever would in Stonewall as she tried to return each one with one of confidence before focusing in on Sakhel. Alright, I think it would be best if you focus on injuries since anything else is going to take a bit more time. But depending on how things go I might grab you if I see any sort of illness I think you can work on. For now, I'm going to start, but let me know if you have any questions. With that, she left them to go to her first patient, Sakhel looking surprised by the entire exchange since they'd gotten in there. Thera seems a lot more open here than usual. She doesn't have any baggage in this place. It's probably easier to get her brighter side. You'll have plenty of time to see it till we get you your level 2. For now, though, let's get you started. He pulled Sakhel to the closest patient, someone with a gash in their arm just waiting to have it closed as they gave a friendly greeting and got started, with the Oracle managing to treat it fast enough before they moved on to the next one, getting most of a broken arm repaired before she needed to take a break for her mana, or at least that was the intent. When she told him as much, he placed a hand on her arm, flooding her with his own reserves and telling her to get back to work, repeating the process again and again as need be as she dealt with both the surprise he could do such a thing, as well as the physical discomfort of having her soul filled faster than it wanted to be. Nonetheless, she worked fast and tried to be attentive, making sure everyone was feeling their best by the time she was done and putting all of her focus into the act. But it would still be better if you were faster, Ben muttered, removing and reshaping one of the mithril bands he kept on his arm and applying his thought speed skills to it to create a circlet to aid her. Use this, otherwise Thera's going to take all of the patience. A person could cast as fast as they could think after all, so long as she dealt with the bit of disorientation that the tool brought, then combined with how her mana could keep being topped up, she'd get even faster, letting her squeeze in more experience each day till she got it. It does have the mild side effect of making her talk and move faster since it alters her perception of time, but that's probably fine. It's not like she's going to exhaust herself. She kept it up well too, slaving away at her work, only stopping when Thera grabbed her to try and advise her on how to help treat different illnesses, until finally they were done, the clinic being left empty of patients. They received their thanks from the present staff before they finally left, Sakhel looking completely worn out by the time they got back to the cart. Ben, no offense, but I hate your circlets, she complained as Thera looked at her with pity, knowing just how bad they could be. I'm so glad we're done. We're not though, Thera told her. That was just the first stop. I usually try and hit 5 a day when I go out, but since you're here making things a bit quicker, I was planning on going to 7 instead. So do you not get home until midnight usually? Sakhel, we weren't even there for an entire hour, Ben told her. Your sense of time is just off because of the circlet. We'll be back before dinner. She looked at the item in her hands, understanding but not thrilled with what it implied about how she'd be handling the rest of the day. I'm not sure I have the mental stamina for this. Well, hope you get used to it, Ben laughed. You're stuck with it till you level up your life magic again. Just do your best. The faster you succeed, the faster we move on to part 2. Which is? I'll tell you then. So you're too far in to say no. That fact that he wasn't being forthcoming with whatever it was he was planning filled her with suspicion, but she tried to keep the thought away. If her apostle was doing all of this to get her a bit closer to achieving her dreams of awakening to plant magic, she wasn't going to turn him down. After a long day of working Sakhel to the bone, they finally returned to Stonewall, dropping off the Oracle of his faith before he split from Thera to do his next major task, going to speak to the would-be manager of the facility he had set up. The man was waiting outside of the building, in the new, empty area of town as Ben ran over, inspecting his skills as he got close enough. Oh cool, 8th level enchanting and fire magic, along with a 6th level for water. He couldn't immediately place his race, assuming he was a hybrid of some sort, having both 4 arms and eyes, along with green scales across what was an otherwise human-looking face. Hello there, he said, putting on his best smile. I'm Ben. I believe Nair sent you. He did. The man nodded. I'm Kufno. I look forward to working for you. I'm glad to hear it. So how much did your god tell you about what you'd be doing here? Less than I'd like, he admitted. It was mentioned you wanted someone for a largely managerial role, but I was told to ask you for the finer details. All right, that works. For now, why don't you come on in? I'll explain a bit about the specifics of what you'll be doing and get you acquainted with the area. With introductions done, he opened the building's doors, showing the vast area within as he led him through. So obviously there's a lot of space, Ben went on. I'm expecting about 24 people to be working under you as they start arriving in the next few weeks, so for the start you'll be here to greet them and explain the finer details of what I expect done. To make things simple, you're basically going to be testing spells to the greatest extent you can. Come on, and I'll give you a bit more detail from here. He led Kufno over to the storage area, where 100 crystal cubes were already set up after nights of enchanting them. And I still have so many freaking more to do too. But that was a later problem. He went over to the first, showing it off. So as you can see, I've marked the areas where different spells need to be connected, as well as the others where mana needs to be run through. I've got a variety of rainbow mana crystals already set up to do just that, so you'll all just need to attach them after setup each time and remember to remove them between tests too. The main thing to remember when you're working is for you to record everything to the greatest detail you can. What spell is being attached and its affinity, the level it's being attached at, the effect of the spell on it relative to the expected effect of such an enchantment. There's literally no such thing as too much detail because the changes you can get are pretty extreme. For example, he attached rainbow mana crystals to where he needed to for his already set up cube, showing the effects as it lit up with the simple light spell applied to it. In most cases, there were only glowing spots in each marked location, with a few that didn't seem to activate at all, but in others there were different effects. Light being absorbed instead of released, colors of it other than the plain white it should have been, and one where it was letting off some level of heat too. All of these different effects are coming from the same spell, he explained. It's all just being changed by what the mana goes through first, which is exactly what we're trying to understand here. I have a booklet of my notes I've taken on this single spell on this one cube alone, and that's the standard I'm looking for. He handed it over, letting Kufno flip through it, seeing diagrams and measurements, along with any less certain observations, all of the work Ben had done for such a tiny part in his effort to learn what he could. Once he got to the end, Kufno looked around, seeing so many more giant crystals already set up for testing. It's certainly a lot. And there's going to be more, Ben told him with a nod. Once the rest of the enchanters come in, my hope would be to get multiple crystals completely tested each day. Don't let how many are currently around fool you. By the time the rest are set up, there's going to be thousands to test, with even more to run after this first round is over with. Well then, it sounds like I'll be employed for a while, so I have no complaints. But if I could ask, what's all this for? So much work. What's the point of it? What? Nair didn't tell you? Would you question a god? Of course I would, he told the man with a grin. But alright, the point of this is simple really. The gods have a spell they've been using without properly understanding. I want to figure out what makes it tick, and the sooner the better. Ideally, we'll have this first part done in less than a year, but from there who knows how long it will take. Since we have a bit of time, I'll give you some hands-on practice before showing you to your home. You have fire and water magic, right? Let's see what you can do with it. That went super well. Tell Nair he made a good choice. Ben had zero complaints about the man the god had selected to manage his facility. Kufno seemed serious yet friendly, and appeared to be both detail-oriented and a hard worker. Exactly what Ben wanted from someone he was putting in charge of his project. And given that in a week or two the entire team will be here, I should be getting results before I know it. Which also means I'm going to need to finish up more crystals, so there's no chance of them having nothing to do. I guess that means a few more sleepless nights ahead. Let's see, as long as I have someone to run their mana through me, I should be able to get them done at breakneck speeds at least. Of all of the abilities he'd gained with Awakening, that was the one he loved the most, even if it was one he was already seeing he needed to be careful with. It was obviously killing his mana and regen growth rates when overused, something he didn't want to lose out on. Taking mana from others was only handy when there was someone to do it with. Anytime he was alone he needed to depend on his own reserves, so he needed them to keep growing too. But even if I'm only doing this when I absolutely have to, it's already great. I guess my growth rates are going to be a little screwed until Sakhel gets her level since I need to keep taking from Thera. But hopefully that's not too much longer, so it should be worth it. She's a trooper, she'll be fine. I'm more worried about how long this will take. If it's been a few years, then assuming she's been training regularly we might get her the level in a couple days of constant work. But I don't want to find out that this is going to be a multi-month long task. I really have other things to do. Listen, I don't like it either. In fact, I really freaking don't like it, but this would solve a bunch of different problems all at once. Just gotta deal with one incredibly awkward convo with Thera and Sonia first. His god fell silent as he got back home, enjoying the smell of whatever was cooking as he went into the kitchen, finding the two of them already there. Perfect timing, Ben. Dinner's ready? Sonia told him as she laid out plates, making small talk about how the day had gone first as she spoke about the clinic before moving on to asking about their own. We spent the day helping Sakhel train her life magic, Thera explained. And I sure would be interested in finally knowing why, since you're telling her it's to help her awaken her skills. Sonia looked surprised, and suddenly all eyes were on him as he felt his mind's push to think of a way to explain what he wanted to do that wouldn't be immediately objected to, only to fall flat as he beat around the bush. Well, it's a little complicated, but the next step after getting her to the 7th level would be getting her to the 8th. Yeah, that's how that usually works, Thera told him dryly. But I somehow doubt you're planning on going around with me and her for years just so she can level 1 magic slightly faster. That's because I want to take a shortcut. I want to take her to challenge the Life Tower, and I'm hoping you two will join me. The table fell silent, the expected reaction really, but as much as he didn't want to suggest it himself, he really couldn't think of anything better for solving so many problems. Completing the tower would let her get 2 extra skill levels to her unawakened skills. If she put them towards her life magic, then he was sure he'd be able to help her awaken her magic with what he intended. And there was more beyond that too. Sonia had an 8th level life magic, exceptionally good at her job by all accounts, at least as far as a typical life mage would go. And Nair had told him in the past when he'd first learned about the tower trials that they'd be able to tip someone like that over to awakening. It was the fastest way of dealing with her insecurities about not being good enough for Falk that he could think of. And then beyond that, if I really do succeed in awakening Sakhel, that has plenty of other excellent implications for how I might be able to personally do my little part for the world, as well as all I might just get out of it. But I have ambitions beyond money for this. I'll tell you about them later. Thera felt her jaw clench as she processed what he'd just suggested. She'd joked about the prospect of taking on that tower after they'd finished the Earth one, but she hadn't actually had any intention of going through with it. Doing any tower trial was taking one's life into their own hands, and she still remembered seeing some of what Ben had gone through. Him laying on the ground, bleeding and broken, along with the scene of him slowly turning to stone, only surviving the ordeal because she had her experience with petrification. Beyond that, she still wasn't clear on how doing it was supposed to help Sakhel awaken her skills, given that getting to the top would only get her to the 9th level of life magic. But she was able to pick up on the other reason he had suggested it as well. Her aunt beside her, still looking shocked by the suggestion, would get the best potential payoff if they succeeded in such a thing. She would be able to be pushed to the awakened form of her magic, and hopefully with it, give her the confidence boost she needed once Falk returned to town. All that mattered was if they'd actually be able to succeed. When she gave it some thought, she couldn't deny it felt possible. She herself was incredibly powerful, and while her aunt's magic may not have been awakened, her attributes were excellent because of the potions Ben had forced on her, leaving her already comparable to many awakened skill holders. Sakhel wasn't bad herself, and as for Ben, she knew he was resourceful and didn't doubt he was already planning on how to make it even easier given what they already knew from their experience in the Earth Tower. That did of course leave who would be their 5th if they were even going to take one, but that was less important than the question of the toll it might take. "Do you think you'll be okay if we do this?" she asked him, not referring to any injuries he might incur but instead looking at the mental toll it could take. He understood what she was asking, and if he was being honest with himself, he had to admit he hated even making the suggestion. While overcoming the Earth Tower had helped a bit with some of the lingering trauma of being trapped in Galwax's trial, walking into another one still seemed mad. He didn't care how often he found himself in dangerous situations, he was never going to like them. But everything that could come from this makes it worth it. "Who do you think I am?" he told her confidently, putting on his biggest grin. "I already have a few ideas that will make things easier on us. I'm not going to say there's no risk, but there's plenty of benefits too. One of which is that you're talking with the king of sacrilege himself. Watch this. Hey Sonia, the front door of the tower is a hint to whatever the first floor is going to be, and on the 4th and 5th floors magics other than the one that fits the trials theme can't be used. Also, you probably shouldn't spread that around 'cause it's supposed to be kept under wraps by a covenant. Is it okay for you to tell me that then? She asked hesitantly, already seeing a future where Ben would be punished for sharing that. Well, the gods should have been able to figure out that I might not be bound by it given my skill, and nobody told me not to spread it. He told her with a shrug before looking to the sky. Of course, if that was just an oversight and anyone is going to try and keep me from mentioning it now, too late and tough luck. 'Cause there's no way I'm not bringing it up with the other two we're going with. I have a couple other tricks too, so what do you both say? The end of the world is still on the horizon. It doesn't hurt to have a little more power, does it? Bringing that up was cheap but effective. Both of them had seen the first wave firsthand. Neither of them could deny the desire for any extra strength. All right, Thera told him, wanting whatever bit of extra power she could gain along with the good it would do for Sonia. Auntie, I think you should agree to this too. I really doubt I'd be of much help, Thera. But I don't, Ben spoke firmly. Sonia, when you're doing something as crazy as putting your life on the line, one of the most important things you can have is trust. I'd take you over any random awakened life mage any day of the week. Come with us. He spoke with earnestness and sincerity, trying to forcefully get his feelings across and doing his best to keep his face from changing as he saw himself succeed. All right, I'll go. It was clear in her eyes that she had her own complicated thoughts on the matter, but Ben didn't care. With lives on the line as soon as they entered the tower, his only concern now was making sure they'd all make it out again, lest the death of anyone he loved forever weigh on him. Which means on top of doing some late-night crystal enchanting, I also need to work on tool design. This is fine, I'm a lean, mean enchanting machine. What's a few more days of working myself to dust? He already had plenty of ideas, all there was really to do was refine them before putting them into action. And I'll absolutely take that. In the days since he'd first gained the skill, he hadn't found himself with nearly as much potential to train it as he had on that first day. As easy as it was for him to go and throw his money around to practice, his time was filled with trying to help Sakhel awaken her skill, working on tools for the coming tower, and completing more crystals to hold the structure of the summoning spell. That left comparatively few times to work on it, at least not in a completely ethical way. His solution had been to train at the clinics where Sakhel was practicing her magic, subtly linking his minds with the healers and patients around, not building theirs up to the level he knew he could, but instead only adding a strand or two on, giving them a boost to their thinking power that was handy without being disorienting like it would be if he just kept piling things on. As it stood, nobody even realized he'd done it, with the few who were conscious of the change at all attributing it to a sudden bit of clarity. But I still hate this. This is definitely not the peak way of using my time. Sure, he was practicing both mental symbiosis and deep connection, and he was making sure to materialize grains of all sorts of materials in his pocket as well for the job experience, but he wanted to be at his forge or working on the summoning spell, not out treating himself as a battery when that was all he could do. There's no reward without risk. Besides, maybe that will be just the kick you need for talking that succubus into being your head priestess. What was her name again? Valeria? Myriad said evasively. What, did she convert away from you already? Then is she not good with your other believers? Then is she bad at connect or something? Then literally what is the hold-up? Ben closed his eyes and let out a deep sigh, pinching the bridge of his nose as a few of the patients in the clinic looked at him. Okay, I'll freaking work on this too then. I'm 90% sure that as long as I really can force Sakhel over the edge, I can swing things so that she'll accept if you ask. Just gotta modify the plans a little. Anything if it means having one more person to keep me from having to be a responsible apostle. I did it! Sakhel yelled out, breaking through the conversation as she jumped up, radiant in her joy. I leveled up my life magic. Only took a week, huh? Thank God. Congrats. He told her as Thera conveyed her own before going back to healing those around her. Looks like we've finished the easy part. So what comes next? She didn't like thinking of that as if it had been easy. Between the constant work, the circlet that made that 1 week feel like 2.5, and the constant strange sensation of having her soul overfilled with mana, it had all around been pretty terrible, but she knew that her dream would never be simple to fulfill. The entire time she'd worked, she hadn't been told what would come after, and her mind could only fill with the thoughts of whatever training would be forced on her for both her earth and water magics, as well as what else might come next for life. From the bit she'd seen of Ben's life along with her talks with Myriad, she knew he was a hard worker, maybe too much so, and a part of her thought he was planning on working her to the point that she might awaken the skill by the time the next wave rolled around, leaving her completely unprepared for his actual thoughts. Well, since you're done, this will be challenging the Life Tower in a couple days, just long enough for you, Thera, and Sonia to get all of your stuff in order. We'll really only be gone for, at most, a week, so look forward to it. You aren't being serious right now, are you? Of course I am. I'm always serious. Ben, this is why Myriad says you're insane. I'm a level 7 life mage as of today. Do you even have life magic? No. But that's really just a minor detail. This feels like a pretty major detail, actually. Sakhel, I'm not going to lie to you and say this is going to be safe, and admittedly I have a couple reasons to think this is worthwhile beyond just helping you, but I want to give you the chance to come because I believe this is an excellent opportunity to achieve your dream. Not to put too fine of a point on it, but we could all be dead in a couple years. I don't know the timescale you think you might be able to awaken your magics on, but I feel like you weren't acting in a way that would get you to your goal in that time. She chewed on what he said, still hesitating but thinking it all over nonetheless. She knew that there was a very clear time limit they were on. Should she risk her life for the chance of achieving her dream or just be happy with the time she had, even if it meant never getting there? I mean, even if we get to the top and I get my 9th level of life magic, there's no guarantee I'll be able to awaken it from there. If we get to the top, then I have a way I think could awaken your skill. I put it at 50-50 odds. Myriad told him privately. Sure I can. Either it works or it doesn't. Sounds pretty 50-50 to me. Besides, I put way too much work into memorizing the biological structure of a freaking seed to let this fail. Sakhel heard none of that exchange, being too enraptured by what he said. She trusted her apostle. If he thought the odds were that good, then she believed he had a reason to, and that did help tip the scales for her. Risking her life when she wouldn't get the payoff she wanted was one thing, but risking it for a coin flip, it felt insane, but she'd already felt she'd invested too much to back out, just like Ben had hoped. Okay. You say we have a couple days? Absolutely, he grinned. Don't worry. This is absolutely going to be terrible. But there's a chance it won't be too terrible. I have no clue how I'm going to explain this to Raelia, was the last thing she muttered before Thera forced her back to work. Even if she got her level, she was still in the clinic, so there were still people to help for whatever bit of practice she could get before she would really need to test the bit of skill she had. I've done it, Myriad. I've opened my third eye and can see the truth. Biology is chemistry, chemistry is physics, and physics is awful. I hate this. Whose terrible idea was this to begin with? Then I'm a fool. The worst part of trying to memorize the structure of a seed was the sheer level of detail it needed for a chance to be viable. A lump of iron was just one type of atom again and again and again. Anyone who was materializing it didn't need to worry about its precise structure. It ultimately didn't matter. Even for normal materials someone wanted to materialize, this was infinitely worse. If a water mage wanted to create water or ice, they'd only need to know a ridiculously simpler structure, and it would even be possible for them to achieve it without knowing that, though much harder. For him, he couldn't have an atom out of place. Which means I really do need to know if this is even possible before I try to help Sakhel, don't I? He, Thera, and Sonia were all waiting by the cart for her to arrive. But given the stakes, he needed to have some sort of assurance that he wasn't insane for thinking such a thing. Regardless of how possible it would be for someone else to do it with his help, if he couldn't personally manage, then he'd drastically knock down the odds of success in his head. Of course, the fact that I don't have life magic might hold me back a bit, but this is just an arrangement of atoms. I can create atoms, therefore. As Sonia and Thera chatted, he instead looked at his hand, concentrating with all he had as he did. It was Thera who noticed he was doing something first, the air thickening with a bit of mana under his intense focus, but she didn't speak up. She might not have known what he'd decided to do on such a whim, but she could see he was invested in it. Instead, she pointed her aunt to him as well, assuming that whatever happened, it might at least be interesting. He took no notice of it. Almost 1,000 minds were all intensely devoted to his singular goal as mana flowed out of him, bending to his will. At first, he felt himself fail. Stray atoms were created but didn't link to a greater whole. Being so insignificant it was more like he'd done nothing at all. But from there he kept pushing, letting mana seep out of him as it changed from elements to compounds, compounds to genes, genes to cells, and finally showed its end goal, becoming a proper seed and proving that, even if he might not have been able to help someone else manage the same thing, it was possible. With the success came the feeling of his mind reeling as it underwent another extreme change in such a short time as everything in his head suddenly became more clear, topics he'd read in the past standing out in his minds, unfaded by time as books he pored over were recalled perfectly, word for word in his head as he quickly put together what happened. Knowledge skills do the same sort of thing for specific types of knowledge, but given how it awakened, does it mean I can do the same thing with all knowledge? That would explain why I immediately got another level of it too. But why the hell did I even awaken it to begin with? He had no clue how the two events were connected. He understood it was plant knowledge specifically that had awakened, but he hadn't just learned anything as far as he was concerned, at least nothing that should have been enough to push the skill over the edge like that. His god said, almost sounding in awe. As his god left his head, Ben couldn't help but give a parting grumble. If I'd known this was possible, I would have tried to get Yuzu and her teacher to cast that soul spell on me. It wasn't like it would have made a huge difference for his attributes considering all of the skills he'd already awakened, along with his resistance, but it was still annoying that he'd just missed out on a few points of easy growth in what had been nothing more than a simple experiment to see if there really was a point in them risking their lives. As he was mentally dealing with that though, Sonia and Thera were staring at him, not sure if they'd just seen correctly. When a person awakened a skill, their body would light up from mana pouring into them, but it would weaken each time. The last time it had been incredibly faint, but now the bonus to his attributes was less than a 1% increase overall. Neither of them could be sure they'd seen correctly. It was Thera who asked, shaking off the feeling of how unlikely it was with the knowledge of all of the insanity her boyfriend normally pulled. Ben, did you really just awaken another skill? Accidentally, yeah. How do you accidentally awaken something? Sonia asked, feeling blown away by having seen such a thing again after having just seen it on the battlefield. I was just seeing if the way I'm planning on awakening Sakhel even has a chance since we're about to head out, and I guess it pushed my knowledge skills over the edge. He told them with an awkward laugh. The fact that part of facing the trial was to help Sonia with her own insecurities on such things clear in his mind. Feeling the weight of their shocked gazes, he instead pulled out his card, looking it over briefly to see how it had worked out for him. Damn, I'm not sure if it was awakening the skill, leveling material knowledge, or successfully materializing a seed, but I just got an insanely huge boost to my job level too. Probably not going to bring that up though. He was already raising that job shockingly fast given that he was able to materialize his mana for practice, and it seemed he'd just gained a new way to go about it. They had hours until they'd get to the Life Tower after all, and now that he'd gotten the feel for materializing something like that, it would only be easier to do again. And the more practice I have at it, the better the odds are that I'll be able to help Sakhel. Plus I can already feel this new skill making all of my thinking and memory significantly better. Oh man, this really is all coming together, isn't it? Every new success was a step closer to him achieving his goals. He would happily take all the growth he could get. So doesn't that make this his 7th? Sonia asked quietly, as Thera rubbed her head. Yes, because he's absolutely ridiculous. But when you compare that to how he was when he arrived, wouldn't that mean dash? She never got to complete the thought. Whatever she was going to say was lost as Sakhel finally appeared, running up to the lot of them and deeply out of breath. Sorry I'm late, she panted. Raylia was having trouble saying goodbye, so I got held up a bit and... Is something wrong? She was able to pick up on the atmosphere that came from him awakening yet another skill. The feeling of shock, happiness, exasperation, and disbelief all rolled together as Ben just shook his head. Don't worry about it. It's nothing important, so let's get going already. The sooner they were done, the sooner that Sonia would for sure have an awakened skill, Sakhel would potentially have one, and Ben would find himself busy again with the implications that helping her awaken would carry. But before any of that, he needed to deal with the trial. After a nauseating trip of rushing through the skies to get to the gate, they finally landed, rolling through the streets on solid ground, letting both Ben and Sakhel recover while Sonia for her part managed to enjoy traveling like that as much as Thera always did, wearing a bright grin as the experience only lightened her mood. Like niece, like Anne, I guess. At least it seemed to help take their minds off things for the time being. While he'd been materializing seed after seed on the way there to pass the time and get experience for both his skill and job, the rest of them had been carrying the weight of what they'd be walking into. While Thera hadn't experienced any major hardship in the Earth Tower beyond the strain of overwork, she'd watched Ben suffer through it and couldn't help but worry there'd be a repeat of the experience, while Sonia and Sakhel both couldn't keep away the concern about whatever they'd be walking into. Both of them knew, as well as any other resident of the world, that trials were tests from the gods for mortals to prove themselves, with great rewards coming at the cost of great dangers. Neither really believed they were prepared. Both of them could only put their faith that Ben was judging things accurately without putting too much faith in any of them. They were all obviously trying to mentally prepare by the time they got to the gate when Ben got off, handing Thera his card as he did. "Here, if you guys want to get lunch, it's on me. I'll be there in an hour or 3. "Okay. Where are you off to?" Thera asked, eyeing him curiously. "Couple final things to finish and gotta grab our last party member since I don't even know if she got the letter with the invite. I shouldn't be long." "All right, in that case we'll meet you at the tower." They parted on those words, Thera taking the other two through with her to the magic towers as Ben instead went off to first find a prospective future co-worker, taking the gate to Analia. He walked the now familiar streets, his many visits there giving him a good idea of much of the area, while his god helped guide him the rest of the way to a rather unassuming building as he let himself inside. Walking confidently and with purpose like he belonged there past the secretaries taking appointments until he found a succubus hard at work with another, her hands on both the woman with her and the brace on her arm as a few minutes ticked by. "All right, and it looks like you're done," she said, giving the one with her a smile and receiving thanks in exchange. "Make sure you don't take it off if you leave the city, but otherwise enjoy your trip." The client walked out the door, giving Ben a smile as Valeria finally noticed him, almost freezing as she did from trying to process the fact that her apostle was so unexpectedly before her and trying to figure out what to do, ultimately falling to a stiff bow. "Honored apostle, it's lovely to see you again." "Good to see you too, and seriously there's no need for formality. Just call me Ben." "Of course, Ben. I wasn't expecting you. Is there anything I might help you with?" "Become the high priestess of my faith so I can do even less. I have some business in the area so I wanted to stop in to chat," he told her, putting on his best salesman face. "I remembered the last time I saw you, you felt like you were struggling with the reason you converted a bit. I wanted to see if you were doing better." She visibly relaxed when he said that, the look in her eyes quickly changing to gratitude. "I am. Talking with you at the time really helped, thank you." I didn't do anything. You would have been fine on your own eventually, but I'm still glad to hear it. Actually, Myriad has told me plenty of excellent things about you. I hear that you've not only been acting as someone for the other believers to talk to, but also managed to get a church built in Analia. It's very impressive." "It's the least I could do," she said, looking away as she got the praise. "And I was well compensated for it since I managed to complete my quest as a result." "It's a well-earned reward," he smiled. "And on a similar note, I might have a chance to grant you further rewards." "I couldn't possibly dash." "Valeria, I insist. You would make me look like an ungrateful apostle if you decline." He laughed. "Besides, it's not a guaranteed thing. In the next couple days, Myriad will ask you to go through the gate to the magic towers. There's something small you might be able to help with, and hopefully you'll be paid off accordingly." "Well, if you're sure." "I am," he spoke firmly. "And as a final thing, as shameful as it is to say, I believe that you're more acquainted with many of the other believers than I am. If you would select 2 more who you think have been doing enough to deserve a reward and discuss it with Myriad, bring them along too when the time comes." As he finished his bit, he noticed an incubus waiting behind him to get in, so he spoke again before she could respond. "Anyway, I'll let you get back to your work. It shouldn't be long, so give it your best shot. I have confidence in you." He walked away with that, his God whispering in his mind as he did. It was not. From everything you said, I think she deserves to be rewarded. The fact that I'm going to completely corner her into taking the role after is irrelevant. Look, do you want a high priestess or not? Myriad, I'm such a sweet guy. Who would possibly be scared of me? He took his God's silence as agreement as he walked through the gate to his next destination, making his way to All Faith. Ben, I heard you stopped by before. Sorry we missed you, Jake told him cheerfully outside of his home. Is Thera not with you? Yuzu and Amy are a bit busy right now, but if you guys want to meet up later we could do dinner. This is just a quick pop-in, Ben told him as he began his real reason for the meeting. But we'll be back in a couple days if you want to then. I just wanted to make sure you guys were all right. They carried on the small talk for a bit, the cover for Ben's real goal of meeting his friend, the secrets hidden in his mind. Jake had completed the Life Tower, along with almost half of the others too by that point, and Ben wanted information on just what he was walking into. The issue was that if he brought it up, he knew that the Covenant would block it from Jake's mind. There was always the chance he could push past it with his sacrilege, but since he'd never tried, he didn't want to risk it when instead he could try to exploit one of the new aspects of deep connection. The fact that he could read memories along with minds. He was theorizing that the Covenant acted to keep the person it was on from knowingly revealing anything, otherwise it would simply be impossibly broad, and since Jake didn't know about the new aspect of his skill, that meant there was a weakness that could be exploited as he connected to the man and dived in, pushing through the surface layer of who he was to begin reading the experiences that made him up, being hit by the most recent ones in the face. Oh man, and I should not have seen that, and the fact that it was from his POV is so much worse. Sorry Jake, Amy, and Yuzu, my mind is too good to actually forget much of anything at this point, but at the very least I'll try to not actively think about it. He tried to ignore everything in the man's head if it didn't seem relevant as he pushed on deeper, looking at the trials they'd gone through and filing all he saw away as he watched his friend's life in reverse order. Seeing them conquer space, dark, fire, air, water, earth, and finally making it to life as the experiences of each floor flashed past his mind's eye, the secrets of them revealed and the Covenant rendered useless. With the information he needed acquired with Jake none the wiser, they said their goodbyes, promising to meet again in a couple of days as Ben left for his final task, getting the last member of their party. So what do you say, Steph, you in? Ben asked her the moment it was clear she'd received his letter that very day, with Will beside her looking none too happy about what he was even suggesting. I can't believe you're asking my girlfriend to walk into a death trap, he grumbled. I get it, but also this entire planet is a death trap, he shot back. Steph, you don't need to be compelled to do this. I'm asking you because it's a chance to grow more, and having another awakened life mage would boost our odds of success by a lot. Besides, you have some experience with tower trials already, right? Didn't you do the space tower with Jake and Amy? It was a fact he only knew from plundering Jake's mind just a little earlier, but it was all the better. It meant she already had some experience with tower trials and wouldn't be walking in blind. Of course, I'm still going to give everyone the rundown of what we can expect from this one. God, I freaking love it when things actually just work. It would obviously still be a challenge, but knowing what they'd be walking into could make all of the difference in the world. I'll go, Steph told him confidently, pulling him from his thoughts as she turned to focus on Will. After everything I've had to deal with in the last couple weeks, I want to be a better healer. This is a great opportunity for that. He looked like he wanted to argue at first, but in the end just deflated. Just be safe, all right? If you die, I'm going to beat the crap out of Ben. If she dies, then there's a good chance I'll be dead too, he added helpfully, seeing his friend shake his head at his words. You're too much like a cockroach at this point. Just remember that if she doesn't make it out, then I'm gonna squash you. Loud and clear, man, don't worry. If things get too rough, then we'll leave, easy as that. He nodded, still not happy, but Steph went to reassure him as Ben stepped away, giving them just a little bit of privacy before the two of them would leave to face the coming tower. When the two of them got to the magic towers, they found the other three exactly where they'd agreed to meet, waiting by the one representing the life affinity. Each of them coming to terms with their own feelings on what they'd be stepping into as their internal thoughts were hidden away with determined expressions. Thera's dropped to a more comfortable look when she saw Steph as the two girls went to greet each other before Ben did introductions. All right, Steph, this is Sonia and Sakhel. Sonia and Sakhel, this is Steph. Let's all work really hard on not dying together. Okay? I've met Sonia already, she said, giving a friendly smile to the two. I was in Stonewall for a bit, trying to help put you back together. Guess I was too busy not dying to see that. Makes things easier though. All right then. In that case, just give me a minute, and then I'll give you all a rundown before we go inside. He hopped into the back of the cart where crates upon crates were being stored, all for the sole purpose of containing items that might need to be enchanted upon. He'd hoped from the very beginning he'd succeed in being able to see what the trial contained through the mind of Jake, and since he had, he got to work on making custom items for each floor to be thrown into his spatial bag, the amount it could store exploding after being remade thanks to the new way he could enchant. It was as he worked that the rest of them mingled, with Sakhel and Steph in particular talking to have a better idea of who they'd be putting their lives on the line with. So if you don't mind, what level are you? Sakhel asked, getting to the heart of it and deflating with the answer. An awakened level 1, so don't worry. I should be able to hold my own. Wait, so I'm the worst one here? Technically that's Ben, Thera chimed in. You can't get much worse than being completely incapable of the magic after all. Hurtful but true. It's still ridiculous though, Sakhel sighed. What are these connections? How does he know two different awakened life mages? Do you just meet these sorts of people if you awaken a skill? Shit. Before he could say anything, Steph answered happily, having no clue he was keeping any secrets. Oh, we've been friends for a while before coming to this world is all. I'm glad he was comfortable enough asking for my help. As Thera and Sonia kept their faces stony, Sakhel was left looking between Steph and Ben as confusion changed to uncertain understanding. Wait, so you're both? Yes, I'm one of the summoned, he told her, cursing himself for not thinking to tell Steph that Sakhel didn't know. Do me a favor and don't spread it around. I have a lot of questions. Can they wait? Or is this going to distract you when we're busy trying not to die? This is 100% going to distract me. Fine, he sighed. The cliff notes are that I was the one person who didn't get an awakened skill or enhanced attributes from being summoned, and as a result, no nations wanted to take me in. From there I moved to Stonewall, started my life, found a job and fell in love, and have been dealing with way too much of this world's crap since. But you're an apostle. Me and Myriad hit it off. You could only have been here for what, 3 or 4 years? That's right. And you came with no awakened skills? I did just say that, yes. Then how do you have 2 already? 7, but I guess she doesn't need to know that. Because I'm exceptionally good at what I do. Is there anything else, or can we move on to the more important stuff now? From the looks of it, she was still struggling to process everything she'd heard, holding her head and feeling it pound under the weight of the reveal before seeming to come to terms with it. No, this is fine. Myriad always warns me that you're a little insane, and I already knew that you'd do crazy things like making those enhancement potions and giving away ultra-rare items. This is just another thing. Alright, ignoring the fact that Myriad still talks crap when I'm not listening. Glad we got that over with. Now give me one more second. Using his magic, he sealed shut all of the remaining boxes and bound them to the cart, before moving to bind the cart's wheels to the ground, all to ensure nothing would be stolen before he focused on the trial. Just like the last time it towered above him, reaching up into the sky in all of its might before he turned his gaze to the door and got to see exactly what the clue within it meant. Aside from the magic symbols it displayed, it was a picture of exactly 136 animals of all shapes and sizes along with a couple plants, with dead ones mixed into the group and small, subtle lines connecting them all together. It was a clue he was sure would have clicked when he actually went in, but by then they might have missed the easier way out of it, something he was thrilled to take advantage of once he knew it. Alright folks and watching gods, don't mind just how much I shouldn't know this and focus entirely on how useful it is. For our 2 newcomers who haven't done a tower trial yet, you should both already know they come in 2 parts, with the first being where you can get a blessing after 3 floors and the second being where you can get 1 or 2 skill levels depending on the various conditions. The main thing you need to know is that on the first 3 floors you'll be facing life magic. But you might encounter it mixed with other things too. In the Earth Tower, for example, we encountered both petrification, golems, lava, and more. You stop getting the mix after the 3rd floor, but the trade-off is that on the 4th and 5th you can only do spells that match the tower's affinity, so I won't be able to help with my magics at that point. The explanation was mostly for Sakhel, who was already looking shocked to be told such a thing when it should have been a well-kept secret of the gods. But the rest of them got a surprise as he continued. So for the 1st floor of this one, we'll have to kill the creatures on it. The catch is that they are all splitting a buff, and as they die off the buff, we'll concentrate onto the remaining ones until whatever remains is super powerful. The 2 tricks to finishing it are protecting the few plants around since they'll take up some of the buff too, and if possible, killing as many as one can at the very end of it all so it doesn't leave one super buffed creature. The 2nd floor is also a creature feature, and an extra annoying one too since when you kill it once it revives with a different mixed affinity with life and all of the other 9, so it will keep you on your toes. The 3rd is dealing with an area comparable to an extreme version of the Life Valley. You'll be flooded with life mana and it's going to play havoc with your internal systems and microbiome, so you'll need to do your best to regulate it for about 10 hours. Plus mine too, please. I'll probably manage pretty well with my resistances, but that's still going to suck. Since I don't want to bog you down with info too much, I'll tell you more in greater detail before each section, and we'll worry about the last 2 when we get to them. But for now, how do you all feel? I feel like I want to know how the hell you know any of that. Steph yelled at him, looking just as shocked as the others by that level of detail but being the first one to get any words out. How did you find that out? I can't even talk to Will about the stupid space trial I was stuck in. Well, I have this excellent little mind-reading skill, along with another that makes it a lot easier to get information on these things, so don't worry. Since I'm not under a covenant, I'm fine. He didn't mention how deep connection let him read memories along with minds, nor king of sacrilege. He didn't want Sakhel finding out about the latter, and as for the former, he figured it would just make the others uncomfortable to know. After all, reading minds is already a big enough invasion of privacy. Who would want to hear that I can read their memories too? But, is telling us any of that even a little okay? Sakhel wanted to know, looking up briefly to the sky as she worried about some potential divine punishment while Ben shrugged away her question. The gods made it so ridiculously hard to get around a covenant that if you manage to beat it, I personally think you deserve the benefits you can get from it. Either way, if doing this is wrong, may I be struck down here and now. If I succeed here, then the world as a whole benefits. Besides, this is the only way I can poke at whichever ones wanted to toss me into hell. The rest of them breathed a small sigh of relief as he continued to live despite how little any of them could have argued if he had received some sort of punishment. So there we have it. Nobody's complaining, and it's not like the risk has vanished, only reduced a bit. It's just the perks of proper planning, so unless any of you have anything else, let's give this a go. While they still felt uncertain, no one knew what other point to raise. Things were lined up as well as they potentially could be. The chances of anyone else in history taking on a tower and knowing so much ahead of time was basically nil, so they each tried to put on confident faces as Ben went forward to the door and stopped. For as confident as he sounded talking, at that moment he couldn't make himself move farther as nearly 1,000 minds second-guessed him all at once. There's always something that's missed. It was whispered in his ear again and again as he forced the thought away. I've practically seen what the trial holds firsthand. I'm not missing anything. Even if some stages will be hard, this will still be fine. Still, he hesitated for just seconds longer as he kept trying to psych himself up for whatever was to come. Come on, it's just a few steps and I already know what's in there. I can do this. I didn't freeze up last time. There's no reason to now. Of course, last time it wasn't his idea to challenge the Earth Tower. In fact, he'd been against it. In the current case, he was not only the person who brought the idea forward, but talked everyone with him into it as well. Sure, he had good reasons, wanting to see if he could force an awakening for the potential that would have on the world as a whole, wanting to help Sonia get past her insecurities so she could have a chance at happiness with his teacher before they were all dead, wanting Thera and Steph to be just a little stronger to increase their personal odds of survival, and wanting to get a few personal benefits that would come with reaching the top as well, but that meant that whatever happened to anyone with him was his fault. which means everyone has to get out of here even if it breaks me. He took a deep breath and one final look at the door before pulling it open and taking his first step inside, telling himself he'd be ready for whatever was to come. Once again he declined to allow the trial to place a covenant on him as they all passed the boundary, seeing what it contained as they each took in the vast space. Like so many he'd done in the past, it looked like an area without end, even if it had to be some trick of magic making it seem that way as he wondered on it. Maybe it's done by warping space? Make it big enough and I won't accidentally see the back of my head, but that would still be mana intense. Of course, this entire thing has to be disgustingly mana intense. It wouldn't be shocking if they're empowering it with faith too. Of course, if they are, that leads to the question of how Galwax's trial kept going at full power, but that's something to think on later. Looks like it's starting. While the area at first seemed barren, it wasn't some empty expanse like he'd dealt with in the past. There was proper ground beneath him and a few tall trees near and far helping to soak in some of the coming buff as the first few creatures made their appearance. All of them looking like monsters that actually lived in the world as beasts began to fill the land and sky, all rushing towards them. "Steph, could you open a portal to them?" Thera asked as she prepared her magics. Not the earth or life that she typically relied on, but her new non-affinity branches she needed to practice as crystals of solid mana began to float around them. "I want to start chipping them off while we still have some distance." "You got it." No more than a second later did a hole in reality open between them as beasts were reduced to blood and meat, leaving three of them nothing to do while the carnage took place. Though Ben and Sakhel both had some long-range attacks, neither of them could add anything that Thera couldn't manage herself, while Sonia had nothing she could do at a distance, everything she trained for being too hands-on to help, at least until things drew closer. So that's the first 54 down with no problems at all. Sure hope any watching gods are embarrassed about how this is going right now after only the first few minutes of work. That just leaves what's coming next. "Pretty sure we'll be seeing some coming from below us soon," he chimed in as Thera was moving. "Already working on it." Beneath their feet a barrier appeared, willed into existence under Thera's power to separate the lot of them from anything that might come from below, just in time for them to feel the first strike as whatever tunneled through the ground smashed against it. The force was enough to raise them all though, and her new magic was still weak. It only took a couple more hits for it to shatter, not that that raised the danger. The moment it did, she simply switched to a power she was far more familiar with, her earth magic moving to crush the dirt the hidden creatures were crawling through, killing them all before any could have a chance to reveal themselves. Going back to practicing things with a poor magic control really sucks. Her control with her awakened magics had grown to be as good as what anyone else could expect, and both dark and telekinesis were high enough in level that she wasn't having major problems with either, but her new ones she was staring from the bottom again, with things only a bit easier thanks to her practice and levels with the rest she wielded. She wasn't doing bad, but it was obvious to her that she still had a ways to go. Not that anyone was going to complain when she'd ended the problem as soon as it started, while Ben continued his quiet countdown of what was left with only 60 remaining. Of course, we should be feeling everything that appears getting more powerful, but if Thera can keep things up at this pace then we'll be fine. Hell, better than fine even. We're absolutely speeding through this floor. It was hard to not feel good about it. After all he'd been through in other trials, he couldn't help but feel he was really going to get a win as he got to watch Thera continue her slaughter, the number of incoming creatures going down as the rest would get the benefits of her work, which I'll absolutely need to show some proper appreciation for after. I have money to abuse, maybe I should rent out an art gallery or museum for a day to get us a private tour, that could be fun. He let some minds keep up with those small plans in the back of his head as he eventually called out to get her attention. 20 left. It honestly doesn't look like you're going to struggle even if you keep at it, but if you're not feeling confident I'd try catching the rest to finish off at once. She gave him a quick nod, doing just that. It wasn't that she didn't think she could handle it. While it was obvious the beasts around were getting faster, none had gotten the chance to end up near enough to show off any strength. But she'd been in 2 trials herself and understood the value in playing it safe, so she changed from her non-affinitied options to the earth she was so comfortable with, encasing the beasts that were already rushing forward on the ground and entrapping any that were using the sky before bringing them all to her, and using the magic the tower was there for to finish the job as she let loose the life mana within her to play havoc on their bodies, blocking connections to their brains and equivalent organs as each remaining life was snuffed out only seconds later, a way out appearing in exchange. Sonia, Sakhel, and Steph were all at a loss. None of them had expected things to go so easily, nor to have finished a floor so soon. Steph especially, having the experience of taking the space trial, had been expecting at least a few hours, not less than half of one. The experience couldn't help but fill them all with a bit more confidence. Even if they'd each done little to help in getting through it. It was just the first floor, so they were sure things would get worse, but at the very least it seemed manageable. Ben and Thera were feeling best of all as they went through the door, with Thera enjoying the feeling that she could handle whatever was thrown her way while Ben was already thinking of the next section and ready to rush through, eager to get it over with. All right, everyone. Are you ready to move on to the next bit? Or do any of you need a break at all? They looked amongst themselves for a moment, and it was Sonia who answered, giving a confident nod. It's not like most of us have any reason to be tired. I think we should be fine to go through so long as Thera doesn't need a break. I'm fine. Don't worry about that. Cool, Ben smiled. So remember what I said about the second floor then. We're dealing with something that is going to be pretty damn hard to kill. Even ignoring the fact that it keeps coming back for more after each death with different magic tricks up its sleeves. He went on to explain what the effects he was aware of from what he'd seen in Jake's memories. Its incredible level of self-healing it displayed along with the way each life it came back with would blend with another affinity. Fire making its attacks burn not just flesh, but a person's life force, death working off of that same thing. Letting the beast steal the life of others to raise its own healing rate even higher, water seeming to alter the way a body handled its fluids and more from there, with some he hadn't seen thanks to Amy and Jake's teachers killing it before those effects could be shown. Okay, but what's it look like? Sakhel wanted to know. I don't personally want to be blindsided by anything like a Leviathan. Nothing like that. It looks, well, honestly a lot like Falk, but nobody tell him I said that. The beast would be sufficiently ape-like for the comparison, though it stood taller than his already very impressive teacher's 8 feet, the coming monster being around 12 high. More than that, it had strength and speed beyond what one would expect from its frame. It's going to be dangerous, but nothing that we can't handle. And in an open field it will be an easy target for Thera's magics. Absolutely going to need to make up for how much we'll all be relying on her later. He couldn't help but feel confident in everything after just how easy the first floor had ended up, and with everything there was to warn them of out in the open, he wasted no further time going to the door, pushing it open and walking through as he was greeted with the dense forest beyond. Damn. Wow, this is exceptionally not good. What he should have been seeing was a grassy plain when he got through the door, the beast standing at its center and ready to fight the second they were all through. But what he got instead was nothing like what had appeared in Jake's memories. Instead, he found himself in front of a dense forest. Whatever the goal of the floor was being left as a mystery to him as his minds rushed to understand just what had gone wrong, ending with a guess quickly enough, even if the implications of it were terrible. Not just for the floor but for the trial as a whole. I've been stuck on a false assumption from the start, haven't I? Galwax's trial was 11 stories high and had 11 floors, but the towers stretch into the sky despite having 5. I thought that was just a side effect to let them be more complex, but that isn't really what I'd seen the last time, is it? So if that's not the case and based on what I'm seeing now, this probably means that there's a range of floors a person can end up on. Shit, if that's right then who knows if I'll even be able to put anything I'd seen from Jake to use beyond the first floor? I mean, it makes a bit of sense that there'd be different options since I doubt the aquatic races would be able to do the same floors as the terrestrial ones. But then how many different options did the gods make in the end? It was a question he wouldn't be getting an answer to as the others stepped through, and he rushed to connect his minds to each of theirs, using his mental symbiosis to force his thought speed skills on them to explain the problem as quickly as he could, not wanting to waste a second when he had no idea about what was to come. So isn't this really bad? Sakhel asked first as they all took it in. Wasn't the whole reason we were doing this because you knew what was ahead? It just means we're back on the same level as anyone else who does a trial, Steph told her, trying to be practical about it despite the concern tinting her thoughts. Worrying about it won't help now. All we can do is keep going. She was right, of course, they were already on the floor. All they could try to do was make it through. and then have a serious talk about where to go from here. Things had just become dangerous enough that his previous confidence had vanished, but he would worry about that later. As things stood, he needed to focus on what they needed to do now, so with that frame of mind he focused entirely on the woods before him. It seemed like the intention was to go into them, or at least that was how he interpreted it. After all, why have a forest if not to explore? Sure, it could have been another combat-type floor that was hiding whatever beasts they were meant to find, but even if that was the case, the exit could still be hiding within it all. So then, should we explore? Sonia asked, giving voice to exactly what he was thinking. If we don't know what to do and there's an entire forest right there, that seems like it would be a good starting point. Seeing no other choice, they all agreed and walked up to the edge of the woods, with edge being the best word to describe how abruptly it started, as if a line had been drawn for it to begin, with the trees, bushes, and other bits of plant life so densely packed that they couldn't walk shoulder to shoulder if they wanted any chance of squeezing through the trunks. Without a word, Ben went first, not leaving any room for argument as he pushed ahead. As far as he was concerned, he had gotten them all into whatever they would be coming across. He refused to accept the idea that any of the others should face more risk than he would when anything that would happen would be his fault, and to lower the odds further he pushed out his connect as far as it would go, feeling the subtle minds of the plant life for anything he could get, as well as hopefully for any warning there was to be had if anything showed up as they began their trek through the trees. None of them were comfortable as branches snagged their clothing and cut at their skin, but that was clearly going to be the case from the start. There was barely even any light trickling down from above, creating a cold and cramped atmosphere as they just kept going, waiting for something to happen. Maybe the trees will start moving and attack? I haven't felt anything like that from them yet, but it could happen. Come on, this is a life magic trial. There's got to be something here, so what? Trees are alive. Forests are vast ecosystems filled with life, but I'm not seeing or sensing anything else. There doesn't seem to be any animals or even insects, so how could life magic be used here? Damn it, I'm actually completely at a loss. No matter how he kept pushing his brain, nothing felt right. There was always the chance the forest had some sort of defense mechanism in it in the event they cut any down, but there wasn't any real point to that as far as he could see. So maybe it was a time limit of sorts? It was always possible the trees were growing, slow enough that none of them could tell as they moved, but fast enough that if they didn't get out in a few hours, then they'd be trapped within a mass of wood, swallowed by the forest itself. And my imagination is definitely going to give me nightmares. I guess I'll at least try to keep an eye out for that. A few of his minds were pushing his thought speed skills as far as they would go while the rest observed the world in real time, creating a strange contrast in the way his thoughts met that he did his best to put up with. Having both let him process things in different ways, and he would take any small advantage he could get as they went through. For the first 20 minutes, things seemed fine, marking it as a trial that was sure to build up in his mind. A slow start could mean a rough finish, especially when they still don't know what to expect. But as each passing branch and thorn picked at his few bits of exposed skin, just what they were going to go through became clear to him. It started small at first, just a bit of a persistent itch that wouldn't go away that he attributed to the constant feeling of sticks scraping at his exposed hands. But as the feeling changed to one of numbness, what they were dealing with exploded in his thoughts as he called out to those behind them. Pretty certain we're being poisoned, so you all might want to start treating yourself. He tried to sound calm, even as his mind flooded with potential scenarios. If their bodies were being numbed, then there was always the chance it would keep getting worse until they collapsed on the ground from the lack of sensation, or else it might keep them from detecting other problems, opening the door to their organs failing without them noticing until it was too late. Hell, if the floor is poison-themed, then for all I know the issue isn't any cuts or scratches I'm getting but pollen instead. This might be bad. As the others focused on healing themselves, Thera finished and walked up to him, placing her hands on his face to treat him in the same way. Did you notice any other symptoms? He asked her, wanting to get an idea of what was happening. I noticed a bit of itching before my hands started to go numb, so I'm thinking there might be multiple poisons at play. A bit of lightheadedness, she told him, which doesn't leave us with a lot of options, does it? I'm not good enough with barrier magic yet to protect us with how dense this all is, so all we can do is keep going and hope it doesn't become more than we can take. Not really a fan of that when you consider how trials typically only get worse with time. How's your mana doing? She could only give him a funny look with the question. Compared to the rest of you combined, I might as well have an infinite amount. Why? I've got a very fun, very cool idea for how to not have to deal with this. I'm assuming there's earth beneath all of this. He couldn't actually see any himself, the roots of the plants being too thick and dense and blocking out even the smallest patches of ground. But his girlfriend gave him a confident nod. There's a couple feet of it till it stops. Why? Well, Miss Infinite Mana, we're presumably looking for an exit amongst a forest of poison trees. As far as I can see, the quickest way to get through them would be to knock them all down. Her eyes widened in understanding, and she couldn't help but break into a smile at the prospect of putting her power to the test like that. Sounds like a plan, she told him before turning to face the others. And are the rest of you doing okay? They could see that Steph was helping to treat Sakhel as Sonia focused on herself, but none of them seemed to be in any danger for the time being as Thera went on. Okay. I'm going to do something, so everyone just watch your head for falling branches. It was all the notice they got as she held forth her staff, directing her magic far enough into the distance that she was fairly sure nothing would come down their way as she rolled the very earth the forest was bound to, tearing roots and bringing down dozens of trees in one go as her spell went on, carving a wide path for them to get to and keep going as the others watched the display of sheer power. Be on your toes, Ben chimed in, breaking them all from what just happened. There's always a chance that bringing things down like that could have released something into the air. If you think you feel anything, say something and start healing yourself immediately. Warning given, they continued on their way, enjoying the bit of extra space they now had as Ben used it to subtly connect to their thoughts, wanting to be conscious of how they were feeling in case any of them were poisoned again, along with their thoughts on what happened with the trial, though in that regard their minds were too preoccupied with the matter at hand to give it the proper consideration. I guess there will be time for that once we get out. If anyone wanted to leave, he had no intention of stopping them. In fact, he would encourage it. Getting into Jake's memories had been such a slim chance to begin with, but considering how it directed things, they were actually worse off for it. Ben had plenty of tools prepared for going in. He even had a few general antidotes just in case anyone ended up poisoned, but he'd left almost everything outside when he thought he knew what he was getting into, only taking whatever seemed like it would help, with everything he'd chosen likely ending up useless if they didn't come across any of the same trials in the end. Thera's covering us all pretty well for now, but who knows what the future holds. He could still remember the last trial where they'd been separated and Yuzu had almost died. It wouldn't have shocked him in Yuliel and Vasta had only allowed the young soul mage to join them specifically because they hadn't known she would be separated despite having done the Earth Tower themselves for that very reason. Thinking you knew something and being drastically wrong was so much worse than just not knowing. He didn't want to distract himself with the thoughts, but a couple spare minds couldn't help but keep going back to them as they continued their march, only stopping occasionally when any of them felt something for a round of healing. Each effect was slowly getting worse, from burning pain to hallucinations, but without brushing against the plants causing it. Each event was infrequent and quick to treat under their constant vigilance as the forest was slowly destroyed, until after only a few more hours the exit finally appeared amongst the trail of destruction, letting them all step through and leaving a feeling of confidence in the others that Ben wasn't ready to believe in himself. After getting out of the floor, each life mage worked to heal themselves one final time, just in case any poisonous effects hadn't ended with the section, before they all looked to each other, wondering what to do from there. Things had just gone about as far from expected as they could, so they needed to know what they'd do next. They were just waiting for someone to speak first. Of them all, Ben had it the worst for the simple fact that he was cheating, reading their minds to know how they each felt instead of listening to whatever they might say, only to be faced with the horror of his earlier success. Convincing them each to go, he'd stroked their desires for strength and power, and now he was paying the cost of it. None of them wanted to leave. Maybe they would have felt different if things had been more dangerous overall, but given the ease they'd gotten through the first floor, as well as how harmless the second had ended up once they'd worked things out, it had left Sakhel and Sonia at least with a misplaced sense of security, while Thera and Steph were both of the mind that they could handle whatever there was to come. Which we absolutely don't know is the case. For his own part, he was torn. All of the benefits of climbing the tower remained, but it felt like the risk had exploded. He would have felt better if he was picking up any sign of hesitation from the others, but the most he was getting was Sonia's internal debate about her personal desire against the risk of the unknown and how going farther could endanger her niece. But together, I don't think there's anything I can actually say on this floor to talk them into quitting here. Shit, okay, gonna try to not panic and figure this out. The second floor was admittedly a terrible place to end things given that the potential to get a blessing was there so long as they completed the third, and if things went poorly on the next floor then he was sure he'd be able to talk them into leaving there. It would be a loss for everyone to not make it to the top, but a level or two wasn't worth dying for. Okay, he began, pulling all attention to him. Clearly things didn't go as planned, and that's on me. I'd assumed that the tower was a set number of floors, and it looks like I'm wrong, which means there's no way to know if any of the other three will be what I think they are, so obviously this just got a lot more dangerous, so does anyone want to get off here? Nobody is going to hold it against you. Please prioritize your own lives here. He asked it despite already knowing the answer as he rubbed his head, trying not to show his stress as not one person said they wanted to go. Okay, fair, we're pretty close to getting the blessing, so why don't we talk about this again after the next section? For now, why don't we take a little break? And I'll try and deal with the sudden crushing weight of it all. He'd convinced each one of them to join him for one reason or another, which as far as he was concerned meant that their safety was his responsibility. Never mind the fact that he was the only one without life magic. If any of them ended up hurt or worse, it would be another thing to haunt him. He couldn't let that happen. Not like I have much choice in the matter though, do I? He asked himself as he pulled a pan and ingredients out of his bag to make a meal for the lot of them as they all chatted, with one common theme among them all: how well everything had gone. It really seems like you'd be able to manage this yourself, Thera. Sonia laughed as she wrapped her arms around her niece. Seeing you in the clinic is one thing, but actually joining you for something like this is so much better. Of course, maybe this is one thing we'll keep from your mother. I doubt she'll worry too much, Auntie. Are you forgetting who forced me into my first trial? Sonia couldn't help but chuckle thinking about it despite the danger, both past and present. I was thinking more along the lines of how she'd complain about not getting to join us. Honestly, I don't know how she stays so free-spirited despite all of that responsibility. You're right. I can already imagine her being a huge pain about it. But are you going to be okay for the next section? Sakhel wanted to know. I literally can't begin to imagine how much mana you just spent. What's your regen rate even like? Good compared to others, poor compared to my total mana, she said evasively. Even if all of Stonewall knew she had an unnaturally large quantity, she didn't want word getting out about just how unnaturally large. Either way, I'll be fine after just a couple hours, and I still have plenty to spare. The half-dryad could only shake her head hearing that, not knowing how many figures she would even try to guess at before changing the topic of her attention as she looked to Steph. And so, you're from a different planet, what's that like? She was kicking herself as she said it, the question feeling like it had come out as awkward as it had sounded. But she couldn't deny her curiosity. Otherworlders had been a huge topic of conversation only a couple of years prior, and while she wanted to question Ben for all she could given the reveal that he'd secretly been one the entire time, his brief summary of things had made it clear it was a touchy subject for him. Not to say it wouldn't be one for any summoned individual, but Steph took it in stride. A little lonely at times, but since I live in a gate city I can make time to meet with some others every now and then. Plus I have my partner Will with me, so it makes things easier. Of course, the money I'm given makes things easier too. But this is a pretty big departure from what I'd been planning to do back on Earth. From there she told the rest of them a bit about life on Earth from her own perspective as Ben finished cooking, letting her wrap things up before calling them to eat. He couldn't help but worry about just how chipper everyone's moods had ended up, their conversation wiping away their bits of lingering worry as it only festered in himself. But he tried to keep that from showing as he spoke up. So I have no clue if we even have a chance of getting it, but for Amy, Jake, and Yuzu, the next section involved lasting 10 hours in an area filling with more and more life mana and having to actively keep it from destroying their bodies. As someone who's been in that exact scenario before, I've got to say it sucks a lot. But with all of the life mages here, I think we could probably handle it. It did have a couple other things going on too, it seemed like. I couldn't be certain, but I think it had something akin to streams of life mana flowing through it where certain areas would become significantly more concentrated, so sensing it and getting to safer sections would be a priority if I'm right about that. But since they had Yuzu with them, they didn't have any real problems. As he explained, they all nodded along, feeling like it was something they could handle if that was what they ended up with, and in their defense, they were probably right. The four of them had differing levels of life magic and he had his resistances. With Thera there to help them all, it would be shocking if things went any less than fine. But that was only if they really did pull that floor from the stack. And for all I know, there's a chance we could get their second floor now instead. It's impossible to say for sure without actually doing it. He felt his body want to actively reject the idea of going further, but suppressed the feeling as he stood up and stretched as he focused on the rest of them, wishing he'd see just a hint of hesitation instead of the generally good atmosphere around them. All right then, shall we go on? Stepping onto the third floor with the others, Sakhel couldn't help but feel confident despite herself. The first two floors had just gone too smoothly. She couldn't deny just how much of that was thanks to Thera, but it did wonders to wipe away plenty of the worry she'd felt going into it all, and couldn't keep herself from imagining the future even as they started the new wing of the tower. A 9th-level life mage. It would absolutely be massive progress towards her goal. Ben had been right about that when he'd asked her to come along. It was clear he was still keeping something from her. He still hadn't said whatever was coming after the tower, but at least in that regard, she had absolute faith in him. He was the apostle of her faith. If he thought he had some sort of method that could push her over the edge, then she was going to believe it. Another different one, Ben spoke up through clenched teeth, pulling her from her thoughts as they all looked around. The floor itself was strangely barren, being nothing more than an empty white expanse, with a single arch sticking out in the distance. Given the nature of the place, it was hard to be sure how far off it was, but from how small it seemed it couldn't be close, especially if reaching it was their goal. There was an undeniably ominous feeling about it, at least for her. Somehow, just how empty everything was managed to be more uncomfortable than the forest they'd just gone through. She couldn't begin to imagine whatever challenge could be hidden in thin air, but that didn't change what they had to do. So shall we get going? Thera asked them all, breaking the small silence as the rest of them nodded. Looks like we have to, Ben sighed, pointing up as he did. We're on a time limit. Satchel's eyes were pulled to the sky, the one area she'd neglected at first, with glowing numbers hanging over her head. A countdown that had already started, giving them no more than 10 hours. As one they started to move, but despite it all, she still felt more confident than anything. Even if she was the lowest level there, at least in terms of those who had life magic, she couldn't help but feel all the more sure about their odds for those who were there with her. Of course, I can't hold them back, she thought, slapping her cheeks as she did. I'm an oracle and there's going to be gods watching. I can't put on a shameful act here of all places. On top of her goal, she was a representative of Myriad, and as far as she was concerned, that meant she couldn't disappoint. It was Sonia who noticed it first, a weariness seeping into her bones that she couldn't escape, weighing her down more than she should have been from what was nothing more than a simple walk at that point. It wasn't like she was worn out already, but there was an edge of it on her she couldn't escape, a weakness in her muscles and just a bit more weight on her shoulders than she was used to dealing with. Is anyone else feeling a bit weaker than usual? She asked. Maybe heavier too? None of them stopped, but they all thought it over, with Ben in particular clenching his jaw as he thought. Ben, it's nothing, he told her, waving off the obvious concern as she picked up on that little slip in his expression. This just reminded me of an annoying experience. Well, maybe a couple annoying ones. You're all being slightly debuffed. I mean, technically I am too, but I'm not going to feel something like that this early. It looks like there's a non-affinity gravity spell starting to press down on us too that I am feeling, and given the setup I'd guess both are only going to get worse, and the challenge is to make us have to buff ourselves to get to the end. Which I'm really not a fan of. She looked at him a second longer, unable to escape the complicated feelings about what the young man in front of her had to have dealt with in the last few years to be able to so confidently state what subtle magics he was under, especially to be able to pin a rare non-affinity spell. But her niece spoke up before she could comment. Well, I think I can get us out of here basically immediately, she told them confidently as Ben shook his head. Let's hold off on that for now. I think it would be best for everyone if we did this the creator-approved way for as long as possible, then we'll switch to your idea. Ha! I can't believe you're saying we should do something the way it's meant to, Thera teased. Aren't you all for finishing things as easily as possible? He trailed off as Thera laughed, and Sonia couldn't suppress her own smile seeing it. Her niece was so much brighter now than she'd been in the past, smiling all of the time, so full of life and so much more willing to show it compared to when she used to hide herself away from the world, along with growing closer to others that would join her for such an adventure. Although treating this like any adventure isn't exactly the best idea given the stakes. She couldn't help it though. It reminded her of her younger days, traveling with her sister and Falk, seeing the world and getting into trouble. Well, mostly Pell getting into trouble, and then me and Falk needing to get her out of it. She mused as her longtime friend's face came to mind. It wasn't like she didn't know why she had been asked to go along with such a thing. She basically pinned her inability to make any sort of progress with the man on her feelings of not being good enough. She doubted that the way this had come up later was entirely unrelated, even if Ben was framing it as a way to help Sakhel with her own desires. And I really can't let myself not do it after doing something as crazy as this. Right? Not that it really seemed crazy given how the first 2 floors had gone. Sure, climbing one of the towers for a reason like that was obviously mad. But her niece had gone and made both seem like basically nothing. Maybe that should have left her feeling like she hadn't done enough personally. But she was too filled with pride watching the girl she loved so dearly, who could barely manage her spells a few years ago, shine so brightly. As she kept walking, she began to buff herself a little to take some of the edge off. But she couldn't help but have faith that things would work out. By the time they only had 5 hours left, Steph felt herself needing to really push herself for her buffs, as she used her magic to not only cover herself but help Sonia as well, while Thera handled both Sakhel and Ben. I guess that's what makes this a trial, she thought to herself, unable to completely shake the oppressive feeling of weight coming down around her. It wasn't like they couldn't have gotten through it faster. She was a space mage after all, but Ben seemed to want to play this one as straight as they could, and she could at least understand why. The first 2 floors had gone super smoothly, unreasonably so, and they had 2 people with them who hadn't challenged a tower before. It made sense to want them to properly understand what it involved, even if she did think it might have been a bit unnecessary. The challenge was for life magic. Sure, they might find themselves in a position where they needed to heal or buff themselves like they'd already seen, but there was only so much that could be done with that particular affinity. It wasn't easy to use by any means, but once one had a certain level of medical knowledge to go with it, it ended up feeling surprisingly narrow. Of course, it seems like the tower itself was made with the idea of combat in mind, at least since the world's been obsessed with it for who knows how many thousands of years. But even if we do get another combat-themed floor like the first one, I don't think we actually need to worry so much. The best benefit of life magic is that it's mostly gentle. She didn't want to take it too lightly, but she didn't want to over-worry either and stress herself out jumping at shadows. Like any challenge, it felt better to face as best they could. Limiting themselves at all just seemed like a waste of mana, which I'm starting to run low on, which means doing any sort of teleportation is going to be hard on me when we do decide to quit and skip to the end. Oh well, it seems like Thera has a way out of this, and it's not like her reserves are going to be hurting by the end of this. Might as well get the practice while I can. With that positive frame of mind, she went back to focusing on her buffs, letting herself burn just a little more than she needed to as they went on their way to make things more comfortable. 2 hours left, but MMH. Yeah, I'm calling it. Okay. Thera spoke up, pulling all eyes to her. This has been a good bit of practice, but I think it's time we just skip to the end if you're all ready for it. She got no disagreement, even if Ben looked complicated about it. By that time she was handling the buffs on all of them, the rest of their mana supplies low enough that there wasn't much other choice. Not that they hadn't held up well, it was just the nature of the trial pushing past what they could each handle. It wasn't a challenge really meant for anyone without an awakened life magic to their name, and if it wasn't for her overwhelming power, the lot of them would be crushed against the ground by that point as the tower's spells played havoc with their bodies. For her though, covering the 5 of them felt easy, and she couldn't deny it felt good. She'd grown to be so comfortable in her power compared to the past, it left her feeling like she could actually take on the tower herself. It wasn't that she didn't feel any sort of risk about it. She still remembered the worst parts of the Earth Tower, and she still wasn't sure if doing this one had been a good idea. But Ben had been right in his convincing. She wanted all of the strength she could get. She wanted better life magic for the next wave now that she could imagine what the casualties would end up like after seeing that single day of the first one. And she knew that the tower was an opportunity to get it, and fast. Of course, I also want my other magics to improve too. It was with that thought that she held her staff forth to achieve exactly how she planned to get them out of there, as she ran her mana through it and pushed her memories for all she had, bringing forth iron where there'd been nothing previously. It wasn't as much as when Ben had helped her the first time, maybe only half of what he'd let her create when they'd worked as one, but it wasn't like she had used up her entire mana supply for it either, so she made more, with 4 more massive clumps falling to the ground before all of their eyes, crashing all of the harder for the added gravity the trial was putting them under before merging each together into a long seat for them all to rest on to be carried forward at higher speeds than they had any hope to run, bringing their time down to nothing. I feel like this is bringing back some memories that ended with me flying into a wall, Ben muttered as she flicked his shoulder. That was only the once. This will be fine, don't worry. If he was still feeling any uncertainty, he hid it well as he sat down, the rest joining with him. While it was far from the most comfortable thing in the world, that didn't much matter as she raised it in the air, forcing herself to multitask by keeping up the buffs as she shot them all through the sky, not paying any attention to the sounds of screams at her sides as she focused. It seemed like the rising spell effects had more to do with their time in there than distance from the exit. She didn't need to rapidly pump anyone with mana and worry about the side effects, only needing to maintain what she already had as minutes passed and they reached their end, getting to the arch as she slowed down with care, not wanting to throw anyone like she had in the Earth Tower as they finally came to a stop and got up, making their way to the exit. It was hard to keep the smile from her lips as they passed through, finding herself in the break room with the rest. She was doing it. She'd ensured everyone made it through each section, and by all accounts easily. There were only 2 to go, but even as a little voice in her head warned her otherwise, she couldn't help but feel confident. If the first 3 floors were meant to help someone judge if they should go further, then the answer was obvious. There were no guarantees in life, but at the very least, she wasn't afraid of whatever would come next. Myriad, break the rules and talk to me, damn it. I need to complain, or at least bounce suggestions off someone. Despite his plea though, no words were whispered in his head, no matter how badly he wanted them. The 4 with him were all feeling confident. They really had every right to be confident too, given what they'd faced so far. There hadn't been a single challenge they'd struggled with yet, but Ben still couldn't help but worry. There's 2 floors left, and I have no clue if either of them are going to be what Jake went through, and in principle they should be the hardest. I mean, I guess the last 2 ended up being the easiest in the Earth Tower, but that seemed more like luck than anything. There's no way to know if it will actually hold up for us. He felt stressed, the weight of each of their lives hanging so heavily on his mind, even if there'd been nothing in the tower to cause any real fear yet. Thera had proven consistently that she could cover for all of them, but the fact that his initial plans had gone so wrong left him suffering from his own uncertainty. But I can't go and actively try and talk them into leaving when things have actually gone so well either. Ugh, damn it. So I'm going to ask this again to be safe. But does anyone want to leave? He tried, wanting to see if the question would bring loose any uncertainty that wasn't at the front of their minds. We're on the 3rd floor. This is the perfect place to head out if you aren't convinced you're prepared for the next stages. For the last 2, there's no going back after all, and they're the ones the gods used to weed people out to get out of having to spend the faith they've gotten from this. If you leave now, you leave with an excellent blessing which is sure to help you with your future growth. He thought it was a reasonable option, all things considered, but not one person took it. They didn't so much as think it over, each of them feeling too comfortable given how it had gone so far. It wasn't like there was no concern, but they all felt like they could overcome it together, with a lot of faith going to Thera for how pivotal she'd been so far. He didn't try to push the issue beyond that, no matter how complicated he was stuck feeling. He may have tempted them all with the rewards at the top, but they were all adults, and to get anyone to leave would be to take away their chances of growing stronger. So instead he suppressed his worries as he quietly cooked a meal, alone with his thoughts as his horde of minds looked over all they'd done and what might be left to come. Man, the whole reason this all started was because I wanted to comfortably enjoy my time with Thera, and somehow that's grown to helping her and Steph get stronger while trying to make the other two awaken. And yeah, I've got some other personal greed for making that happen too, but this has all really spiraled out of control. Definitely going to try and manage the whole risk versus reward thing a bit better in the future. He could only hope that the next two stages would go just as well so he could look back on all of his present worrying as nothing more than his past fears and stresses continuing to pick at him. Unlike so many past nightmares, the ones that woke him this time had nothing to do with the trials he'd gone through, instead being nothing but screams. Deep, primal things, the sounds of hundreds suffering, trapped and being ripped apart echoing in his head and scratching at his memory. Bringing back the couple of seconds he could recall of being connected to so many spirits during the first wave before the shape of his mind had so drastically changed. Freaking great! He muttered as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes before forcing himself up and looking around. The rest of them were still asleep, using the last chance they had to get the rest they could and regain whatever mana they needed before they'd be forced through the next 2 floors to whatever was going to await them. He didn't want to take that from them by moving around, so instead he waited, using his own magic to make the same seed he'd be trying to force Sakhel to again and again, feeling it get just a little easier each time as a pile built up beside him. It took a large part of his inhuman psyche to pull it off, but not all of it, and the bits that were free examined him as he was doing it, trying to refine the process all of the more, wanting to get every chance of success he could for the ridiculous goal. So much of it is just forcing different minds to remember the exact structure of individual parts while others handle the quantities of each part. But now I have my knowledge skill, and the more I can simplify it, the easier it will be to pass on to Sakhel as well. There was admittedly plenty where it could go wrong, but even if it failed the first time, he had a dozen different ideas on how to make it work in the end. It might take a lot more time than he'd originally wanted, but at worst he would just need to figure out all he could to raise the odds. Well, I guess that gives me something else to think about for a bit. He could only imagine his god reacting to such a thing when he'd only had the job for a month. But then, most people with mage jobs couldn't materialize, and none of them were materializing anything at the level of complexity he could. Even if it still felt strange to him, his new mind had become one of his greatest assets by far, letting him test some of the limits of the reality he was in. Available jobs: Trap User, Craftsman Alchemy Path, Craftsman Artistic Path, Craftsman Blacksmith Path, Craftsman Cooking Path, Craftsman Stonecrafts Path, Craftsman Sewing Path, Holy Craftsman, a Mathematician, Cursed Item Maker, a High Tank, Otherworldly Craftsman, Destructive Craftsman, a Master Adventurer, a Soul-Defiling Gardener, a Summoned Enchanter, Ritual Enchanter, Divine Enchanter, a Mind Master, a High Marksman, a High Destruction Mage, World Killer, a Material Creator, Impious Creator. So 2 new ones that are advanced versions of my Material Mage path, huh? It's not like I wasn't expecting any, but the names seem to imply something a little unexpected. Namely, both ended with Creator instead of Mage. At first glance, one might think that both were denoting the fact that he could materialize in general, that particular spell being exceptionally rare, but he had read up on enough advanced mage jobs from affinity paths that he didn't think it was the case, or at least not specifically. If I take the first option at face value, then sure, I've been materializing plenty of different stuff, but there's only one thing I've created that doesn't exist in the universe, or at least not since its dawn. If I had to put money down, I'd say I was going to get those options the moment I made antimatter, not that I can prove it. Which means the second one is continuing the trend of giving me an advanced option that also helps with my sacrilege. Impious, huh? Not respecting the gods. That feels a little unfair. I respect Myriad plenty. He gave no consideration to any of the others in the world as he instead switched his train of thought to just what he should take. Originally, he'd been planning on taking Mind Master for whatever benefit it would give his thought speed skills, hopefully awakening them, but the chances of such a thing weren't guaranteed, leaving his eyes to drift to one of his new ones. Impious Creator. If it was like all of the other jobs that had gotten some of the sacrilegious flair, it was going to grant major bonuses to everything instead of just his mana and intelligence, and it had one other incredibly tempting feature to it as well. The ever-present chance it would help him reach the 3rd tier of the skill. And I have to be so freaking close, don't I? I mean, I have all of these titles that have to be giving it bonuses, not to mention the fact that I've got 4 jobs for it already, and 3 of them are advanced variants. I mean, probably 3 I'm going to assume Divine Heretic counts. Either way, I've got to have a lot going to it. This might just be the little kick I need to get me over the edge, so here we go. I'm taking Impious Creator. Name: Ben Hef. Race: human. Titles: Apostle of Myriad, the Forgotten One, Miracle Maker, Skill Learner, Enemy of Aneth, Trial Defier, Trial Breaker, Godslayer, Monster, Madman, God Killer, Threat, the Mad Apostle, Destined Holder of Connect, God of Destruction, Creator of Life. Jobs: Impious Creator, LV0. Previous jobs: Apprentice Craftsman, Craftsman, Priest, Enchanter, Mind User, Magic Item Maker, Magic Weapon Maker, High Enchanter, Fractured Mind User, Tree Tamer, High Craftsman, Apprentice Mage, True Mage, Tank, Heretic, Adventurer, Divine Heretic, Kin, Master Craftsman, Master Enchanter, Scholar, Connected Enchanter, Infernal Craftsman, Marksman, Destruction Mage, Material Mage, High Material Mage, Profane Enchanter, Master Material Mage. Attributes: A Vitality, 992. A Vitality Recovery Rate, 26 per hour. Mana, 892. Mana Recovery Rate, 64 per minute. Strength, 815. Agility, 264. Stamina, 2158. Intelligence, 3438. Affinities: Light 3, Life 2, Fire 4, Water 3, Air 4, Earth 2, Death 3, Dark 1, Space 4, Time 5. Resistances: Light 68, Life 72, Fire 75, Water 69, Air 66, Earth 81, Death 78, Dark 85, Space 63, Time 61. Blessed Skills: Unending Crafting LV3*, Divine Enchanting LV3*, Unnatural Mind LV1*, Passive Skills: King of Sacrilege LV9*, A Bind, Integrated Demonic Body LV6, Defense Enhancement LV6, Absorption Resistance LV6, Knowledge LV1*, All Affinity Resistance Enhancement LV4, Lesser Inspiration LV5, Fine Motor Control LV2, Active Skills: Stealth LV1, Deep Connection LV1*, Cycling LV1, Marksmanship LV3, Material Manipulation LV3*, Swimming LV1, Dance LV0, Rapid Thought Speed LV9, Thought Speed Enhancement LV9, A Mental Symbiosis LV3. Blessings: Myriad's Blessing, Analia's Blessing, Hilori's Blessing, Galwax's Blessing, Elvet's Mana Regeneration Blessing, Enetha's Blessing, Earth Pantheon's Blessing. Trials: Trial of Analia and Talona, Trial of the Dead God, Earth Tower. So not enough to help push me over that edge then. Lame but okay. It was a slim chance from the start, so he didn't let it get to him. Instead, he went back to his magic, making more seeds for whatever bits of job experience that would give him in the free time he had. Okay, so here's the rundown of what we have left assuming we get lucky. Ben began once everyone was up and fed. From what I know Jake went through, the 4th floor involves using a bunch of different animal parts to build chimeras to complete a series of tasks, from flying and swimming to reach targets, digging, combat, and a couple others. It's another on a time limit and it doesn't seem easy, but if we get it, it's at least mostly safe assuming you guys can put together multiple chimeras. All eyes turned to Thera and Steph as he said it, with both of them seeming uncertain yet confident they could manage. I haven't done anything like that myself, but I've at least read a bit on the topic, Steph admitted. And I have some hands-on experience. It admittedly didn't go great, but that was before I awakened my skill. I'm sure I can manage now. Not the level of confidence I'm looking for when we might die. But okay, Ben sighed. As for the floor after that, it's also simple, along with being pretty comparable to the last one we just did. Only instead of having a weakening effect on you, your life force is being drained. It's also a timed one, but unlike the last, we won't actually be shown the time limit, probably for whatever psychological effects that would cause. Of course, that doesn't particularly matter when you have knowledge from someone who's gone through it. It's about a day long of constantly replacing vitality. Didn't you say before that we should only be dealing with life mana at this point? Steph asked, clearly confused. That sounds like a death spell. At high enough levels, there's no real difference, Sonia answered for her, wearing a thoughtful face as she looked at the two awakened life mages present. And it's obvious that I, Sakhel, and Ben aren't going to be much help for any of that. Do you two really think you'll be able to carry the three of us? Yes. That's my wonderful Sonia, acting as a voice of reason. His elation lasted for only a second before being crushed by the swift nods of the other two. Don't worry, Auntie. I have more than enough mana to cover everyone. This will be fine. And that's my wonderful girlfriend tying my stomach in knots with her confidence. It was clear they felt good about it and were more than ready to go. So in the end he hung his head as he dug through his bag, pulling out the few things he had that he thought would be useful before the spatial effect on it was blocked. He made sure each person carried a few potions on them as he stuffed his own pockets with all he could to be safe before they walked through the door, finally on the latter half of the trial and not seeing the animal parts there should have been, instead appearing amongst a horde of full-fledged monsters, with even more of them running in the distance. Well, damn. His minds had already been moving at top speeds, so he was the first to react, even if there was little in the way of what he could do. Of the few things he had in his pocket, he'd prepared some poisons, but there were a dozen monsters standing around them, quadrupedal and looking like solid lumps of skin other than the teeth and claws at their disposal, both natural weapons that were more like razors ready to tear into flesh than anything one would normally encounter. As he did the first thing he could think to try, he connected with them. For a second he thought it didn't work. There was always the chance that after awakening, deep connection had become a magic skill, blocking it in that phase of the trial, but that wasn't what happened. He was experiencing their senses as his skill would allow and was going to scream into their minds, intending to spook them long enough to give him some leeway, but there was no point. There was no mind to scare. They were basically nothing more than empty dolls, lacking any semblance of thought or soul. Homunculi. He didn't immediately understand what they could be for and didn't have much leeway for figuring it out. They weren't the only ones after all. There was an entire swarm of different creatures bearing down on them, very much conscious of their presence as they rushed forward in a horde, moving as one and at best minutes away. And we absolutely have to fight them because of course they included another freaking combat section in a tower devoted to life magic. But how are we supposed to? Right, okay, that makes sense. Thera! He yelled, not seeing any need to explain that they still hadn't gotten any of Jake's floors when it was so obvious. Everything around us is a homunculus. I'd bet money we're supposed to use these things to fight, so this is all you. He at least allowed himself a moment of comfort. The knowledge that she had experience with homunculi thanks to her Aunt Vividus gave him the brief feeling that things might not be too bad. Right until he turned to face her, seeing a hint of panic in her eyes. Vividus only taught me how to make them. I have no idea how I'm supposed to actually control them with life magic. Okay, not good. Steph. No clue. Sonia or Sakhel? They both shook their heads as Ben was confronted with the situation, but strangely enough, what he was feeling wasn't panic but relief. Ever since entering the second floor and realizing he'd been wrong, he'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop, but nothing really bad had happened. Each section had been so easy that it only put him more on edge with his expectations that something would go wrong. Now that it finally had, a surprising amount of tension managed to leave him in spite of their situation, as he stopped focusing on what might happen and instead devoted himself to the problem at hand. Alright, so that leaves us with Thera killing them all with her life magic, which isn't ideal but it's possible at least. But that means they'll basically be right on us, so we want to close the distance a bit first and have a better option for getting away. Okay, plan time, Ben announced as he already started enacting it, filling one of the homunculi's bodies with his mind to make it kneel down as he picked Thera up and placed her on its back, sitting behind her himself. I'm controlling the few of these I can, and we're going up to the group for Thera to use her magic. You guys are in charge of saving us if anything goes wrong. He didn't give any time for argument as he instead rushed off, bringing the few other homunculi he could with him. Given that the current range of deep connection was 2 meters in any direction, that placed him squarely in a 4-meter circle, without much room to take full advantage of what the trial had provided. Of the 12 available, he was able to get 5 total, and from there dealt with the issue that was making them move. Ben wasn't a quadruped. He had 2 legs as anyone would expect from a human, along with only 1 knee on each of them, unlike what he was learning from the creature he had mounted, with the direction they would bend being different too. Moving was an entirely different beast compared to what he was used to, and he was forced to split his minds evenly for the task of just making the bodies do what he wanted as he forced himself to learn as fast as he could, putting his new knowledge skill to the work as he tried to absorb the subtleties that came with essentially inhabiting such a creature, while what he had left was able to see something he'd been wrong about. They weren't facing a horde of creatures, instead going against one giant one. The mistake was understandable, at least from a distance. The thing was a mass of flesh, tens of meters across and constantly shifting in form as patches that at first looked like scales turned to fur, then shell, and changing more from there, the living blob sprouting arms and legs, tentacles and claws, all at random before they were retracted back into itself to change yet again. "How much closer do we need to get?" he asked, feeling disgusted to be seeing such a thing and not getting the answer he wanted. "Unless we want to risk me accidentally making it more powerful, we need to get pretty close. I don't want to risk my life mana spreading through it instead of overstimulating it, so I need to be able to understand how it works if I want to make it fail." Very much not the answer I was hoping for, but okay. Hold on tight. He pushed the homunculi all the harder to get closer and felt winded despite himself. While his true body wasn't moving, he was being forced to experience what the 5 under his command were going through as he pushed them, feeling like he was running himself as both sides closed the distance, the time till they collided being nothing more than seconds away as Thera screamed in his ear. "We have a problem. I can't kill it." "What?" "Its body isn't set up like a normal animal. I can't cause tissue to grow to block any internal pathways because there are no internal pathways. It's more like a mass of cells than anything else." "So the gods really wanted us to be using the homunculi then?" "That's a problem, but I guess it's something we have no choice but to deal with." "Okay. I guess this means we're going with the intended method. Sure hope this works." With that he got closer, directing 2 of the homunculi under his command forward as the monster reacted to them, stretching its strange body parts out in an attempt to grab as he forced them to weave around them, bending and contorting themselves to snap their heads back to bite down, tearing meat from the larger mass and spitting them out as he dealt with the horrid taste-filling mouths that were not his own as he took a moment to make sure it had worked. For a brief, horrible moment he worried that the pieces might start moving again. But in his small bit of fortune that wasn't the case. Almost instantly he watched the 2 unnatural limbs decay, whatever life they had lost when not part of the greater whole, as he forced both homunculi at the front to keep up the attack. The one he was riding avoiding everything the best he could to keep both him and Thera safe as the last 2 helped with it, swiping at attacks that tried to get around the sides. The entire task felt monumental. Given the size of the thing they were against, it would be a constant act of biting and tearing, whittling the thing down into its smallest of parts for who knew how long, but he thought that as long as he was careful then they had a shot. It wasn't going to be something easy, but then, facing a tower was never meant to be. All they needed was to keep going and keep their hope up, the same hope that came crashing down as moments later the 2 he had on the attack seized up and collapsed to the ground, quicking being swallowed into the thing before them. Shit. It only took a second to understand what had happened. Poison, something that wouldn't take immediate effect but would happen all at once the second it did. Basically having the fighting force he had with him as he was forced to move the remaining 2 to the front to defend them. "Thera, they're being poisoned by something that makes their muscles lock up. Think you can deal with it?" "I'll try." "Good enough, that leaves where to go from here. If she can't heal these ones then we'll need to run back to get more. But as long as she buffs, the one we're riding will win out on speed. The problem is that it will give this thing time to get closer to the others, so we need another way to attack. Unless maybe we don't? What are the odds this thing is technically a homunculus as well?" Taking the risk, he forced himself closer, getting the thing in the edge of his range as he reached out, opening the connection and feeling the mind within. It felt wild and primal and very much there, a sure sign they were going against a properly ensouled creature rather than some pre-programmed husk that he could have potentially taken advantage of, but that created a different option for them. It was something he thought might be effective from the moment he'd understood what was happening in his head as he carefully unblocked his thoughts for that creature alone, filling it with the full force of his mind as it pulled back in shock but otherwise seemed unaffected. Okay, not what I was hoping for. Really thought it would have died. But then based on what Thera said, it probably doesn't have a brain to fry and is instead having its mental load carried by its entire body. Which means if I want any sort of success with this idea, I might need to do something crazy. Hey Thera, I need you to not panic about what's about to happen. I hate hearing that, Ben. Too late. In one swift motion, his hand was wrapped around a knife in his pocket, ripping it out and plunging it in his thigh as he tried to keep from screaming, forcing all of his minds to indulge in the pain as he kept up the connection to the monster before them, watching it spasm in reaction, not understanding what was happening but suffering from it anyway as Ben directed the two homunculi to tear into it in its more vulnerable state as he tried to keep aware of the beast's panicked flailings. All while Thera screamed in his ear. "What are you doing? You absolute maniac. Take that out right now so I can heal you already." The best bet to keep it disoriented was connecting with it, and since using all my minds didn't work, I needed to go a bit more extreme. "It's working, isn't it?" The words were squeezed out through clenched teeth, but there was no denying he was right. He was expertly controlling the homunculi to rip and tear away pounds of flesh, having the two creatures work in tandem to get more than they could when they were split up as large chunks of whatever the beast before them was were sliced away and teeth and claws ripped and dug, all while Thera had a different major concern. "You cut clean through an artery, you're going to bleed out, you idiot. Take that out, so I can close it and stab yourself through the hand if you have to so badly." Yeah, not ideal. He didn't particularly want to have to stab himself again, but he wanted to die even less, so he did as she said, ripping out the knife as she started treating it, swearing at him the entire time as he went for his hand instead, feeling a whole new realm of pain jet up his arm as it went through, with the creature responding to the new stimulus he shared as it tried to escape with nowhere to go. As long as Ben was close by, it would keep feeling it. And I think I can do more from here too. Even as he suffered from his own actions, he wanted to push further, so he grabbed the monster's mind tight as he began disassembling his own, wrapping his thoughts around it and filling them with the pain he felt as it was unable to escape, all while the homunculi tunneled through its flesh, weakening the beast all the more as it slowly died, losing its mass until eventually they were sitting before a creature no more than a meter in size. Its shifting had stopped by that point, being locked into a chimeric form of mismatched parts as Ben forced the creatures under his thrall to finally finish it off, bringing an end to that stage. Did I really just gain a skill from the homunculi I was using? The puppetry skill at least made a little sense to him, even if it seemed misplaced. He'd been working his minds to control the homunculi the entire time, beings that could be described as empty dolls or puppets. The normal way of using them involved ordering them with life magic, but the way he had been far more hands-on. Or minds-on, I guess. Skills are at least a bit related to the limits of the body. Since I was kind of inhabiting another body, was I able to learn an unusual skill? He clenched his jaw, feeling more force than he normally would from such a thing as he imagined possibilities. He might not have had much need for the skill he just gained, but there were a lot of implications for what the fact that he could gain it in such a way meant. Implications to consider later, since his thoughts were brought back to his hand as Thera tore the knife out of it to start healing the damage. Ben, who the hell just stabs themselves like that? Let alone twice. It was maybe a little rash, but it seemed like a good way to keep that thing from trying anything. And hey, it totally worked. She didn't, both responding to that as the other three raced over, having watched from a distance but not understanding the finer details until they got close. "Why is Ben covered in blood?" was the first thing Sonia asked, not sounding as concerned as maybe she should have been given her profession. She knew her niece had things well in hand, as did Steph. It was only Sakhel who looked at all worried seeing the blood as Thera answered. "This floor was a bit more difficult than we thought, so Ben decided to solve it by stabbing himself. "There's a bit more nuance than that," he said in his defense as he described what they just deal with, how basic life magic couldn't kill it and how they had no choice but to fight it with the homunculi, ending with why he decided to try and keep the odds in their favor with the admittedly rash act. The longer this took, the more time there was for something to go wrong. None of them seemed to like the answer, but Ben stood by it. There was no way to know what might have happened if they let things stretch on. What if the creature decided it was bored of them and wanted to go for the easier targets in the back? Or it got used to the way he was fighting given just how few homunculi he had to control at one time. Thera knew it too. She just didn't like it. She understood that thousands of years of her world's culture had been shaped by the knowledge that they'd one day be fighting for their planet, but she hated that it was extending to even the Life Tower, making it so much more combat-oriented than it seemed like it should have been. The floor definitely hadn't gone well compared to the others, but she made do, telling herself that it was just one of 4 as they got up and looked at the door that had appeared in place of the beast's corpse. "Well, shall we go on?" Ben asked, looking amongst the others. They were all a bit more hesitant after what they'd seen, running into a challenge that they hadn't actually been prepared to face, leaving them a bit more worried about what might be to come. Not that it matters now since we don't have a choice but to finish the next floor. Still, he gave them the minute they needed to collect themselves, trying his best to be encouraging before they stepped through the door. His mind's already in a flurry of movement to process everything as he saw that once again, they hadn't gotten any of Jake's floors, when his eyes locked onto the new one's gimmick and he charged into a sprint before anyone behind him could see and stop him. "Wait there!" he yelled back as he ran, trying to keep anyone from following him as they were all still busy with taking in the empty space around them before reading the sign. It gave him a few seconds at least, all he needed to put himself at the edge of a small boundary before spinning around, just in time for it to begin to click with the others just what they were being instructed to do. "Ben!" Thera yelled at him, being cut off before she could say more. "We're on a time limit and I'm the only one without life magic. There's no point in wasting time arguing, so just make sure you save me. Okay?" With that, he gave a confident smile and took a few steps back, crossing the boundary as just what the sign said clicked with the rest of them. "Select a sacrifice to heal. Time limit, 3 hours. He'd already told himself he wasn't going to let anyone else put themselves in danger when he was the one who'd convinced each to come, and he'd meant it, which was why he'd thrown himself into things so forcefully. The outcome was obvious anyway. All that was left was seeing just what he was about to go through. After all, how bad can being a sacrifice be? The answer was horrifically so, as he at first collapsed to the ground when things truly began, and he did all he could to keep from screaming. It felt like his entire body was being stabbed at once, far worse than what he'd done to himself in the last section. But what made it worse was the feeling of movement that came with it. His skin was opening up and peeling away of its own accord as each piece of himself was disconnected from everything else, slithering out of his clothing while his minds were lighting up in the agony that came with being disassembled. It was a pain that made it impossible to think, but the shape his mind had taken had deprived him of the mercy of whiting out that any normal person could expect from such a thing. All he could do was suffer through it as an indeterminate amount of time passed for him, trapped within a dissected body. It never eased, but as each second passed he felt his reason slowly coming back to him, even through his suffering as he tried to keep his focus from his body to instead make out the noises around him, with it eventually becoming clear it was his companions. "Yeah, I get he's a guy and his organs have been altered, but you're the only other human here, Steph, so we have to assume your body plans are going to be similar," Thera said, her voice betraying the panic she was feeling. "I think I have a pretty good idea how he's put together, but I need to do some comparisons or else we're never going to get all of this." "I get that. Just breathe, Thera. We'll never help him if we panic." "Jesus, when did I start using my thought speed skills?" he moaned. Even if they were panicked, they were talking too fast, with only one obvious explanation. "Is that some sort of survival mechanism? I feel like I'm gonna die so time slows down? 'Cause I really don't like it." Even if it was just prolonging his pain though, he didn't stop despite what he'd just thought. Agony meant he was alive, which meant he had room to work. And if I'm going to work, that means I need to see what I'm doing. Oh man, I'm really not gonna like this. Despite knowing he was about to give himself another mental scar with the act, he pushed the feeling away as he reached out, connecting to the women around him to see the world through all of their eyes and hating what he found as much as he was expecting. His body was stripped down and laid out the way a museum piece would be, or perhaps how a medical hall might be set up to teach students about a body structure. More accurately, after the exhibit had been dropped. His bones were all laid out, but there was no organization to it, same with his muscles and organs, all cleanly separated from each other and left on the ground to be reconstructed into a proper person. He could also see someone had vomited earlier, he couldn't tell who, but the puddle of it was thankfully clear of him. He could only imagine what it had looked like as he was taken apart like that. It would have been all the more traumatic if he'd had to see it too, so he didn't touch their memories, instead going straight to speaking in their minds. So it's a good thing I was the sacrifice from the looks of it, huh? He tried to joke, doing his best to hide the immense pain he was in but still seeing some of them flinch as a bit made it through. Wait, Ben? How are you talking to us right now? Steph asked, jerking at the sound of his thoughts. How are you even conscious? Connect is excellent and my mind skills are less so. My God told me he doubted I'd be able to pass out anymore, and it looks like he was right. Really wouldn't recommend thinking with your soul if you can help it. He felt Thera's relief hearing his voice despite the situation and tried to put on a confident front as he looked through her eyes specifically, seeing her use her mana examination on Steph and feeling how her body structure compared to the body plans of humans on Earth. While the chemistry and biology behind it were completely different, the physiology was the same as his mind made connections, his knowledge skill helping with that as he compared what he was seeing to what was before him. Alright, so in the interest of me living, I'll give orders to Sonia and Sakhel if you and Steph are able to act on your own? Absolutely, Thera told him, not questioning where the confidence he knew how to put himself back together came from. If he thought he could, then that was good enough. Excellent, in that case I need you two to get moving and quick. Sakhel, that should be a muscle from my lower back, so place it where I tell you to on my skin. Sonia, you're standing by the shoulders there. Also, could someone tell me how much time we have left? 2 hours, 45 minutes. Sonia spoke as she rushed to do what he said. So it took me 15 minutes to get myself together after, huh? I don't know if that's good or bad. That absolutely doesn't matter right now, Ben. You can ask your God after. Are you kidding me? After having to deal with this sort of bullshit, I'm done with gods. Can I interest any of you in the wonders of atheism? I don't think you can have atheism on a planet where gods definitely exist. Steph chimed in, happy to have the conversation to distract her from how overwhelmingly horrific what she was seeing was. You kind of need either uncertainty or else proof there isn't something. But I'm not talking about a there is no God sort of atheism. I'm talking about a gods aren't worthy of worship sort of atheism, which most of them aren't. I guess Myriad can have a pass, but I'm definitely holding the fact that he didn't warn me about this against him. Ben, Thera began, her voice loaded with stress. I know you have 1,000 minds in your head and I'm trying to be calm here, but if you don't focus on keeping yourself alive for just the few hours we need to, I'm going to have a panic attack. I'm serious. Though I guess I can get a little more serious in ensuring my survival. This won't be comfortable for any of you, but I guarantee for me it's worse, so I'm just going to build up your minds a bit. 1 second. He began to disassemble some of the spare ones he didn't need, wrapping the strands around each of them as he forced the effects of his thought speed skills on their minds, doing his best to keep all of the pain away as he did. Speeding up their thoughts would be meaningless if they couldn't do the work from the pain. But he seemed to have most of it under control, keeping that dreadful aspect for himself alone as he felt their thoughts become more powerful as they each did what they had to. Sonia and Sakhel moving his pieces back in place as Thera and Steph used their life magic to put them back together while also finding and placing parts themselves. All of them moving at a breakneck pace as each of their minds flew. I can't believe I've just become the worst puzzle in history. So very not a fan of this. I think if this world wins, then as a little treat to myself, I'm going to force this tower into another level or reality too. Who knows, since this one is being looked after by living gods, maybe I'll finally get my 3rd tier of sacrilege for it. That would almost begin to come close to making up for what I'm going through here, because a blessing and a couple levels sure as hell isn't going to. He kept those grumblings to himself, not wanting the others to be distracted from what he considered their exceptionally important work of making sure he left the tower in one piece, with the progress going as well as he could hope. Thera's mana examination and his own scattered knowledge on the topic of human bodies was having him reassembled at a fast pace. But there were some distinctly non-human aspects of himself that required a deeper look. He'd known that when partial demonic body had changed to integrated demonic body, the result had been equal parts of his demon organs contaminating the rest of him while his human cells did the same to them, but it had resulted in changes beyond his eyes that weren't so easily seen if not for times when his innards were exposed. It was nothing drastic, but it still left him needing to double-check some of the instructions he passed along, as well as giving him the first look at what had been put inside of him so long ago now. All the while he counted the time down, feeling each second drag on. He knew it was going to be tight, that much was obvious. A body was no simple thing. Breaking it down to its more basic parts and trying to put them back together in such a time frame was stressing each of them out, with the lack of knowledge about what would happen if they didn't finish hanging firmly in their thoughts. Will we fail, or will however all of my bits are being kept from bleeding out all of their fluids just stop? Just to be safe, I think I'll direct them to get my head and major organs done first, and we can worry about finishing the limbs after. He could feel panic building in them all by the time his head was reconstructed, letting him properly see through his own eyes again, and when enough of his organs were in place to speak, he was devoting himself to keeping any reflexive scream from leaking out now that he had the lungs to do it, instead keeping his mouth firmly shut to avoid being a distraction. Each of them was feeling the crunch while making the conscious choice not to check the time. None of them wanted to see what they were working with, instead devoting themselves to pushing as hard as they could in the emergency situation, feeling their bodies and mana strain as each one gave all they had. Arms next. He spoke to all of them the moment his organs were properly in place. He knew what none of them did. They weren't going to make it as things went, but given that, assuming he would live even if they failed, then he wanted the tools that let him do his work as a craftsman. After all, I really hate running anyway. It might have been from how he spoke up, but they picked up on the fact that they didn't have long as muscle and bone were placed down. Being connected before his skin was sealed up as those bits were finally complete. His hands clenching as he enjoyed the feeling of mobility for only a second until he forced himself to sit up, much to the chagrin of the others. Ben Dash. I'm officially an extra set of hands and we don't have time to argue, he told them, already reaching at the piles beside him to put things in place as he kept instructions going in both Sakhel and Sonia's minds for where they should be doing the same. I'd rather not find out that I needed to be completed and can't just walk away without feet. Even as he said it, he was pushing himself, reconstructing his body and feeling his own, still warm flesh in his hands as he put each bit down, feeling the things he was doing now engraving into his mind as memories that he was sure would hit the moment that things became less urgent. Bones were all but flying through the air as he counted down the last few minutes, watching as skin stitched itself back together to seal everything in the time they had left, working their way down from his knees, reconstructing his ankles and finally finishing the absolute mess that was his toes as his companions around him collapsed to the ground in the last few seconds they had, feeling the relief that came with only barely finishing as the adrenaline that was keeping them going finally cut off as they let themselves breathe, the last section of the trial finally done. As the rest of them recovered from the mental strain, Ben went to his clothing that was left in a pile off to the side and got dressed as he tried to keep the memories of what he just experienced from flooding him, with thoughts of what sort of sacrilegious acts he'd do to make up for any of what just happened. He may have tried to cheat the trial, but the fact that the gods were willing to put any mortal through something like that was simply going too far. He didn't get far in his planning before a light appeared before them all, taking the shape of a goddess he knew well. Hellori floated just slightly above them all, exuding her divinity and refusing to meet his eyes. "So you again, huh?" he asked dryly, not in the mood to make friendly, even if it was a god he actually liked. A god who, for her part, seemed more than a little uncomfortable being there. Ahem, yes. When someone completes a tower, if any of the participants has a connection to a god it represents, then that god will be the one who shows up. Since we know each other and Myriad doesn't qualify, I was selected to come down. Fine. Give your little congratulations speech and then hand out the blessings first again. Also, we're talking before you give any skill levels. She wasn't used to his eyes being so cold, nor that strange feeling that came with his sacrilege being directed at her, and she made no move to argue, instead focusing on the rest around who weren't so used to interacting with gods. You've all done well making it to the top. It's a rare enough occasion that deserves to be celebrated. At such a time, having more life mages is just as valuable as having any fighters, maybe even more so. So it's the earnest wish of all who just witnessed the work you put in that you'll use the new strength you've gained to aid the world as a whole. Congratulations. You're all more than deserving of the reward. His thoughts pounded as his mind grew again, hundreds more coming into place as each one there already was strengthened further, all while he tried to keep it from showing on his face as he brought them to order and tried to count them up. So 499 new ones, meaning I'm getting that many each level considering that I had 998 at the first. The more surprising bit would probably be my thought speed skills transitioning instead of awakening. So now each level, the speed I think it will grow by 150%. Sounds insane but okay. And I now have even more minds to make it grow all the faster. Since his thought speed skill was once again at the Zeroth level, he immediately put it to practice with all of the new minds in his head as he acknowledged what notifications he heard in the thoughts of the others. As nice as it was to hear Thera raise her mana recovery, earth sense, and mana examination, the real score was for her magics, and not just her own but everyone's. All 4 of her non-affinitied options gained levels, while at the same time, the life magics of herself, Steph, and Sonia all grew as well. Even Sakhel had the fortune of gaining a level to her earth magic amongst her skills as they each felt the success that came with so much growth. So after Thera takes her reward level that's going to put her at the 4th, and Sonia's sitting at level 9 of the first tier, which means when she gets her rewards she'll be able to awaken to level 1. It's almost enough to put a smile on my face. Almost. He didn't intend to let that bit of success distract him from the torture he'd just gone through, a fact he was going to make clear as he spoke. All right, me, Thera, and Steph will take our levels here, but the other 2 are taking them later. His eyes were daring her to argue with him, to say something about how it needed to be done in the trial to save a bit of faith. But that wasn't what he got. Yes, Myriad is already making sure everything is set up and ready for you. He wasn't sure if it was his face or his thoughts that gave away his surprise at how easy things had just gone. But Hellori spoke in his head to clear it up, trying to keep it private. I'm sorry, what accident? Are you saying I wasn't supposed to be torn apart like that? Hearing that knocked a bit of the rage out of him. A large part of his anger had been from the idea that the gods would do something so torturous to any mortal. Hearing it was a mistake didn't fix things, but it altered the scale at which his anger was being measured on. Alright, well, I don't think that agreeing to something that's literally going to help the world as a whole puts us on even grounds for a mistake like that, but you can help me argue that point when it comes up later. She felt whatever emotions he was giving off decrease as she breathed just a little easier. The fact that no harm was being done by his skill meant it probably couldn't affect her in a meaningful way, but it was the most unpleasant experience she'd gotten from a mortal, which made it bad enough. Ben, for his part, was unaware of any of this, whatever his sacrilege did being driven by instinct, not controlled with intent, as he tried to put on a slightly lighter mood. Okay. Give me 2 levels to my mental symbiosis. It wasn't what he really wanted. He thought defense enhancement was far more worthwhile overall, but what he did want was every chance of success for what would come next, and a higher level of mental symbiosis was his best shot at making it happen. He listened as both Thera and Steph asked for their levels to their life magics before the exit appeared, and they all walked off, with both Sonia and Sakhel left in confusion as to why they were taking their levels later. When they got to the gate, they parted with Steph, with her needing to go off to share the news of her success, as well as let Will know that she was safe, while the rest of them carried on to All Faith. Are you sure you're feeling okay? Thera asked him for the untold time, still worried about any lingering effects of what just happened. Your body is moving, all right? You don't feel ill or sore at all. I'm fine, don't worry. You all did an excellent job of putting me back together. I've got no complaints. No attempt at reassurance kept her from hanging onto his arm, trying to keep him close though. This time, no more towers for real. No argument from me. I still think I might destroy 1 or 2 of them if the world doesn't end as a little treat to myself. We'll see what the future holds, I guess. None of them made any comment against the thought like they usually would, not after seeing that. The inborn respect for gods they each felt could only go so far, and the final floor had just pressed it to its limits. Myriad sighed. Oh hey, you finally showed up after your sweet little apostle was just tortured. I'm gonna need a therapist after that, man. You were yelling at other gods? Ha, I actually would have liked to see that. You always come off as a bit meek with the ones that show up in your realm. And that's why you're the god I like best. Love you, buddy. His god went silent when they reached the door of a building partly within the sea itself, as he introduced himself to the guards out front to be let in before finding many a familiar face waiting. Woo, I win! Jake cheered. I told you it would be him doing something crazy. Ugh. Fine. Dinner's on me tonight, Amy grumbled, still giving them all a smile that disappeared as Yuzu went up to him again, grabbing his shoulders and shaking with all she had as the other soul mage. Elvet looked like he wanted to do the same, the only thing stopping him being his aquatic nature binding him to the water he swam in. It's only been 3 months. Last time wasn't even a year. How does your status keep changing so much each time I see you? The comment immediately drew looks from the others, not just Jake and Amy, but Yuliel and Vasta, who were standing to the side, along with 3 more who were standing at the back. One of which was Valeria, who stood with an Exoraire he didn't immediately recognize but nonetheless had to be one of Myriad's believers that she'd selected, plus what could only be the most surprising second pick of all. I really wasn't expecting to see Cheel here. Greed's son, the very same son who'd tried to eat the crab, was standing with the other 2. Ben had known he'd converted to Myriad after he'd grown his shell, but he hadn't expected to see him again like that. Did she actually pick them herself, or did you give some suggestions, Myriad? He'd honestly been expecting to just see Succubi coming with her. The fact that she got 2 different races, with one of them not even being an enchanter, couldn't help but surprise him. Well, works for me. He gave them all a friendly smile before focusing back on the soul mage who still had him in her grasp. Nice seeing you too, Yuzu. Please stop being so blatant about reacting to my soul. If you're going to look, at least pretend you aren't seeing anything. How am I supposed to pretend about this? Look at how your skills changed. Not to mention all of the jobs and titles. Ben, I don't know anyone with 1/3 of the titles you have. Alright, well, I can update you all later. But for now, do you think we could get to work on our reason for being here? Ahem, that's probably for the best, Elvet said. Supposedly, we have 2 people who are going to awaken skills? We do indeed. Sonia, Sakhel, these are the soul mages Elvet and Yuzu. They're here to help get the most you can out of your levels. While Sonia looked surprised, she had at least known that he had met them. Sakhel, for her part, had her jaw hanging on the floor as she dealt with the shock of what she'd just been told. Why did you not give us any warning? How do you know so many people? I mean, even if I'm the least valuable human on the planet, the fact that I'm on good terms with plenty of others does help a bit in the whole connections department. I just know the 2 of them because I know Jake and Amy. Speaking of Jake and Amy, these are Sonia and Sakhel, the first being Thera's aunt and the second being the Oracle of Myriad. The 2 gave their hellos as Sakhel just rubbed her head. Somehow, this became just as stressful as the tower. Not for me. Anyway, back to what? Yuzu was giving him a strange look, but at his questioning, she could only shake her head. I just don't think it's appropriate to call yourself the least valuable human given the state of your soul. As you currently stand, you're probably comparable to Jake. The remark widened the eyes of those in the room who could understand it, but Ben just laughed it off. Ha, you're sweet to say it, Yuzu. Flattery will get you everywhere, but I don't need my ego inflated. Don't worry. Well, that's even dumber, Myriad. Jake's the 6th most important summoned, right? He's only short of the ones who came with 3rd-tier skills. I obviously don't compare. Alright, sure, I'm good, but the closest thing I have to an awakened combat skill is my magic, and even that's more suited to my crafting anyway. Besides, Jake is able to use every single branch of affinitied and non-affinitied magics. When you add in Amy, who can fight with any weapon and use any augmentation, including one that nobody knew existed before she arrived, they have to be above me. Ben wasn't sure how to respond to that, so instead he didn't, directing his focus to the people around him. Alright, well, back to the matter at hand. Sonia's up first if you guys want to get started. He was freed from Yuzu's grasp as she and Sonia went to Elvet, the 2 soul mages both placing hands on her as the room filled with mana. Hey, this might actually be interesting, won't it? He knew that soul mages could see souls and they were about to witness one awaken, something that was far from a common sight. Ben slipped in close, activating his deep connection and spreading it out to see through their eyes, only for both of them to tear their gazes off of Sonia, looks of horror on their faces. "What are you doing?" Elvet asked, the first to react as Yuzu wasn't able to articulate a question. "Ahem. I have a skill that lets me see through the eyes of others. I just thought that seeing what it looked like when someone awakened from the perspective of a soul mage could be interesting," he answered innocently as the both of them still looked shocked. "Your soul was doing that because of a skill? Which one was it?" Deep connection." "Why? Deep connection?" Elvet muttered, ignoring the question. "So it must connect the soul then. Gods above, this is a first. Explanation, please?" It was Yuzu who answered, looking like she was prepared to start shaking him all over again. "Ben, your soul just left your body." "Not exactly," Elvet spoke before he could panic. "Souls fill their vessels, but yours just expanded beyond it. It's the ability you use for your enchanting, correct? It seems it's awakened in a particularly unique way, but now that I at least understand what's happening, you can go ahead. You're right after all, this isn't a sight many get to see." Nodding in thanks, Ben reached out with Connect again as he saw through both of their eyes. Neither of them experienced the world in quite the same way as him, but it wasn't so different that he couldn't interpret what was happening, at least for the world around them. Seeing Sonia's soul was an entirely different matter. He didn't know how to put it to words. It was a shifting, pulsing thing of unfathomable depth. Structure within it, he couldn't begin to guess at, and skills on the surface, recording the life she'd lived. He'd been told about the structure at least during his research into how to seal one, but seeing it was a different matter entirely. He could guess at what bits were for affinities and what bits resistances based on how things were arranged, but that still left untold thousands of structures within with no clear purpose but still beautiful in their mystery, and that was before he watched Sonia awaken. As both soul mages were casting their spells, doing their best to ensure that the awakening growth would be all the larger thanks to their intervention, Ben witnessed the whole of her soul change beyond just her life magic reaching the first level. In his eyes, it looked as if it had grown deeper, with new structures forming where there'd been nothing before as the room filled with light from the process. Sonia's already high attributes growing all the more as she fell just short of the 2000s for many of them, her mana alone breaching that barrier. By the time the light faded, there was cheering in the room, Jake showing his positive side with Thera joining in as she ran to her aunt, taking her in her arms while Sonia just looked stunned by it all, never having expected to get to such a place, even with help. It was a huge moment, and as far as he was concerned, there was no need to rush it. He let her take it all in as he grinned at the side, talking up to his god as he did. "All right, almost Satchel's time, so let's take that final quest and see if this works. Myriad, let's achieve something great here." The last quest he had from Myriad beyond completing an achievement in his name, it demanded he lead some of the believers of Myriad to completing a great goal, with the rewards being that he'd get a level to something 3 or lower, while the other believers would get 3 job levels. And what greater goal could there be than showing it's possible to forcefully awaken someone, along with actually doing it for the oracle of my faith? I just wish I had a low-level skill that was actually worth raising. Eventually, Sonia got up, the shock of it all leaving her a little unsteady on her feet as he waved Sakhel, Valeria, Cheel, and the last believer of Myriad over. "All right, team, this is it. We're going to be trying to forcefully awaken our lovely oracle here, so let's all do our best." Ben," said Oracle chimed in. "I'm only going to be able to get 2 levels from the tower. How am I supposed to awaken my skill like this?" "I know that, and it's real simple. First things first, ask for a single level to your life magic." She did as he told her, and he saw the comparatively minor change to her soul through the eyes of the soul mages, as well as his own connection to her, before he moved her over, sitting her between Yuzu and Elvet and getting them to start casting on her. "All right, so we're going to see if we can cheat the way souls work by giving you everything you would need to materialize something. I'm going to give you my knowledge and brain power, and the other 3 are going to help me supply you with mana. All you need to do is shape the power." "What?" "It will be fine, you'll understand after I merge our minds a bit. Now you 3 hands and claws on my back and treat me like a staff. Pour your mana into me when I tell you like you're casting a spell. Don't question it, it will work." They seemed unsure but were nodding along, all ready to obey the directions of their apostle as Ben sat down behind Sakhel, placing a hand on her back as he began disassembling his minds, filling them with everything he had learned about the seed she was going to try and create. As the shape of her thoughts changed radically, the more he added, everything weaving together to create a whole with a single goal, as he gave the order and felt the mana pour into him before passing it further along, controlling the output to make sure she would have a high yet constant supply as her soul strained against the unnatural increase. He felt the mana within her move as she tried, points of it flying into the ether as he picked and prodded at her mind, seeing what went wrong and trying to correct it as she did, doing his best to guide as more was wasted in failure, success just outside of her grasp. I refuse to accept this isn't possible. Maybe she doesn't awaken it because of the help, but she has everything she needs to materialize it. Just gotta keep trying. He added the effect of his thought speed skill to her mind as seconds turned to minutes under her attempts. The other three believers had to regulate their mana for something they couldn't help but think was a fool's errand, not seeing what Ben was. With every failed attempt, she got a little bit closer, the flow of her mana ending a little more correct compared to each previous attempt as he pushed and prodded at her mind, aiming her to the final goal before it snapped into place. Where there was nothing, an atom formed, quickly becoming a compound, then a gene, and then more, along with all of the other organelles a cell would contain as more and more cells appeared, linking together within a woody membrane and making a seed, smaller than a grain of sand but clearly there in her hand as her body lit up with mana. Her magic awakening while Ben listened to the notifications in her head as not only life, earth, and water, but her spell unification and connect joined too, giving her the unique variant of deep plant magic in the end. And I guess I'll take my free level to my marksmanship since that at least has the benefit of helping my eyesight. Ahem. I don't believe any waiting gods need to ask what she wants for her second level. Plant magic is partially life affinitied after all. He felt her mind immediately agree before she could speak, and the gods wasted no time in giving it to her, bringing her up to the first of her skill, bypassing the usual work it would take to get there all at once as he leaned back and grinned. All right, gang. Good work. That went well. His words were cut off by Sakhel, the oracle turning around and burying her face in his chest and bursting into tears, catching him off guard for just a second before placing a hand on her head and speaking in a comforting voice. Hey, you got there. You achieved your dream and you did excellent. Me and Myriad couldn't be happier for you. He could imagine pretty easily how she'd felt. She was the only one in her village who didn't have any sort of plant magic, and she'd finally reached it. To finally be able to look at herself and see someone on an equal footing as the rest, those first few moments didn't get much better, and he made no attempt to take it from her. Instead, he just let her cry as her emotions came out. So how are things looking up there? Ben asked as he continued to pat Satchel's head, waiting for her to calm down. Excellent. It was an implication that Ben had been aware of from the start. If it was possible to forcibly awaken a plant mage by helping them materialize a seed, then it should be possible to help awaken anyone with a physical magic, with what that could mean for the world as a whole obvious to any god or mortal who gave it any thought. Well, first, they're forgetting one, and second, they don't think I'm working for free, do they? I owe Jagal and will be awakening her plant mages. That's it. There were a few other combined branches that they could do too, but Ben's focus was elsewhere as he let his eyes flicker to Vasta. Non-affinitied. The best way to awaken it is by using 4 branches together for a spell, right? The fact that I was able to do it with my own means it should be possible, and there's got to be at least a couple people on the world who are close to it no matter how hard it is, right? You're the best. When everyone calms down a bit, bring me up and we can discuss payment. I'm not exactly thrilled with how things have gone when I'm not around, you know. Someone up there is going to try to screw me over and I want to be there to call them out on it. Myriad fell silent, no doubt stressing at the idea of Ben going up to talk to the gods given how things had ended the last time, as the apostle focused on the next thing he needed to do beyond that. You good now? He asked, looking down at Sakhel as she looked away awkwardly, rubbing her eyes. Yeah, sorry about that. He could see that she was trying to get herself under control, the feelings that had just swept her away still simmering beneath the surface as her hands tightly clenched the seed she had created, not wanting to lose it. With his own power, he quickly materialized a lidded jar she could put it in, handing it over so it wouldn't be lost as he went to pat her head one last time. Don't be... I get this was an emotional moment, but why not take time to properly thank the others that helped, Miss Oracle? 'Cause I need to talk to Valeria for a minute or two. Oh, of course. She immediately tried to figure out if she should focus on the soul mages or the other two believers of her faith first as Ben looked to Valeria, nodding his head to the side to step away to chat. So you got your job levels then? He asked her, already knowing the answer from hearing it in her head. I did. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Bah, it's nothing less than you deserve, he said as friendly as he could, all while trying to figure out how he wanted to trick her into taking the role of High Priestess. Myriad is lucky to have a believer acting as devoted as you. Your praise is really too much. I'm not doing anything in particular that deserves it. Nonsense. I've been told that you've been acting as a central figure for many of the believers, and that's obvious enough given that the two you chose to bring along weren't succubi. Ah, I just chat with the few I see in the church. It really isn't anything so great. She stubbornly insisted on deflecting any compliment coming her way, displaying a level of humility that he wanted no part of. Valeria, you really shouldn't sell yourself so short. Why do you not want to accept that you're well thought of by both our God and the other believers of our faith? It's all very flattering. It really is. I just don't think I've done anything to deserve this level of praise. I'm only doing what I should. Got her. Myriad, you standing at the ready with the title? What could possibly be wrong about it? If that didn't matter when you got me, then it shouldn't matter now. Now don't distract me with your ethical concerns. I've got some hardcore apostling to do. Well, if you don't think you've done enough to deserve it, would you be against me asking you to take on a little more responsibility? Only if you're willing, of course. I don't want you taking on anything that would make you uncomfortable. Again, ixnay with the ethical concerns. Of course. I'd love to do more to help if I could. Her eyes were gleaming. A desire to do more for the God that she felt had done so much for her clear given that she still didn't think she deserved such kindness from a being she viewed as so high above her. Feelings that were exactly what Ben had expected and was more than prepared to take advantage of. Ha! Well, it warms my heart to hear you so eager for our God. But at least hear me out first. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Myriad is pretty lacking in priests. It's not the most surprising thing in the world given that he's a smaller god, but it's still something I'm doing my best to address as his apostle. Given that he has a church in Analia and that you were the one who saw to its construction, I was hoping that you might be willing to act as a priestess. Immediately he saw the look of uncertainty in her eyes, the lack of confidence that she could fulfill the role obvious when she hadn't converted out of any heartfelt belief or desire, but instead because she'd been asked by her previous goddess and he rushed to put it to rest before she could say no. I'm sure you know by now that Myriad is rather lax with things, all things considered. If you accept, you wouldn't even need to do much more than you already have been. It would mostly be talking with believers and maybe giving the odd sermon if you really felt like it. Nothing that would take up more of your time or keep you from the work you already do. Hell, being an apostle doesn't even take up much of my time, so I'm still acting as a full-time craftsman. At worst, as a priestess, Myriad might go to you for help with things he couldn't ask a standard believer of, that's all. He could see in her eyes that he had her longing to do more for their cube being just the lure he needed. All that was left was putting the final nail in the coffin. Of course, I understand this might feel like a big choice. I just thought I'd bring it up with you before I look at other options because I know it would personally make Myriad happy if you took the role. He's quite fond of you. I'll do it. That sealed it. How could she turn down something if it would specifically make her God happy? It didn't sound like it would be much more work either, so there was no reason to decline. At least not till the notification rang off in her head, naming her not as a simple priestess, but the high priestess of her faith as her eyes went wide and her jaw fell, all while Ben grinned and took her hand to shake while she was trapped in a shocked daze. Excellent, it's going to be a pleasure working with you, Valeria. I know we can expect some great things. Hey, Sakhel. Come over here and introduce yourself to the new high priestess of Myriad. He was quick to step away after that before she could get a word out as Sakhel ran over, eyes still glowing from her own growth and only growing more excited at the news for Valeria. Another job well done. God, I really am such a good apostle. You're so lucky to have me. Good thing this room is full of healers then. Having finished with that, he walked over to his friends, all of them giving mildly surprised looks except for Thera, whose eyes were instead on the new priestess, looking at her with sympathy. Did you really just trick her into that? Tricking people into taking major roles under Myriad is a tradition of sorts at this point. He did it to me and now I've done it to the other two. Really should have gotten Sakhel to do it to keep the chain of deceit going, but I don't think she actually knows she was tricked to begin with, so this is good enough for now. With that, he officially had even less he'd need to do for the faith, being able to toss any bit of responsibility to others as he basked in the feeling of it, already seeing a future where he could focus more on his own things. Hush now, let me enjoy this. Really? That's pretty fast. The notification asking to bring him up went off in his head and Ben let it take him after getting comfortable, closing his eyes and opening them again to find himself around what seemed like a large round table, hundreds of figures there taking a range of forms, all of them looking right at him, various levels of judgment clear in their gazes. On either side of him, he had the two gods he was closest to, both Myriad and Hellori, and he pushed his mind speed skills to ensure he'd be in a decent headspace for whatever was to come. He didn't doubt that it would be a pain in the ass, but he was going to ensure he got everything he could out of it. If they wanted him to work, then they were going to have to pay. So, he began, happy to take the lead as he put on his best customer service smile. I hear you're all looking to hire me? We are at least here to talk, one told him, looking like a golem and acting as the representative for the rest in the hopes that it would make things go a little more smoothly. The mortals stood out clear in their minds as they all remembered just how their last interaction had gone, and they weren't interested in a repeat. For now, why don't you tell us exactly how much you're looking to be paid for your work and we can move on from there? Ah, of course, but let's switch things up a bit first. How many people would I be helping? The world is pretty vast, so I'm sure there's more than a few I'd be trying to awaken. Of course, any of Jagel's worshippers are getting a free pass since I already made a deal with her. It's just the rest of your people we're looking at. While Jagel's believers number 20, we believe that there are approximately 1,500 other mages on the world who might benefit from your services. The Galemis god explained to him. The number made it extremely clear what sort of position he was in to negotiate. The gods had burned so much effort and faith only a few years ago to reach across realities just to get 200 new awakened skill holders, and now here they were, asking him to personally make over 1,000 more. Sure, the majority wouldn't be ending with multiple awakened skills, nor attributes quite as high as what the majority of the summon were blessed with, but it was still enough to permanently change the landscape of the world. Wow, more than I thought. Especially for Jagel, I guess it makes sense since all of her believers tend to focus on constantly training to grow and protect their forests, but still. Myriad explained privately, speaking in his head. All right, sounds like a fair amount of work, but nothing I'm not willing to take on. All it leaves is the matter of payment like you said then. He watched as various gods seemed to sigh, feeling that things were actually going smoothly and knowing that he was about to strip that from them. He expected to be negotiated down by a significant amount, but he wanted to start high enough that by the time it got to what he was really after it would be harder for any of them to argue. So I'm sure it's not going to be a shock to any of you, but I'm already fabulously wealthy. He began, watching as a hint of suspicion came into the eyes of the god leading the discussion. We are aware. After all, it was their last encounter that had helped make him all of the more so. None of them were going to forget it. So I don't really need more money at this point, he went on, ignoring the looks as those around were reminded of how things had gone when he'd made the potions. I want something else to make it worth both my time and all I've gone through to get to the point where this is possible. Pay me in blessings. The table erupted into chaos at his words, which was no less than he expected. Blessings were exceptionally handy, helping a person raise both their attributes and levels easier without the limits or work that taking a job would. It was basically free growth so long as one was willing to do the bare minimum. Of course, Ben would be happy to do far more than that, but he knew the chances of him walking away with even a single blessing were slim. All this was a road to getting what he really wanted. He waited for things to calm down, his various minds killing time by pulling apart all of the various voices to see what they were saying, with most of them being firmly negative. Blessings were given as rewards from gods, They weren't things for mortals to be demanding, no matter the circumstances. He couldn't help but feel some of their words pick at him, but he elected to be calm. He was going to be a good, reasonable little apostle and then go back to focusing on his own work the moment all of that was done. He'd just need to be relaxed, reasonable, and patient. We are not entertaining this thought. This stupid mortal is lucky he's allowed to continue existing given the way he acts, and that can surely change. Well, that was a real nice second of resolving to be a reasonable person, but I don't think I'm going to allow my very existence to be threatened without a word. Those around him felt his sacrilege leaking out of him. The same eerie presence that did nothing yet spoke volumes as he silently rested his arm on the table, pointing at the god who had said that amongst all of the others until things called down enough for him to be heard. "You, what's your name?" he asked the being he was all but staring into, someone that looked like a wolf made out of rope and getting a swift answer. "I don't know how that's at all relevant to this. Why does there always have to be one guy who wants to be unreasonable? At least it looks like Eneth didn't bother showing up. I can only imagine how things would be going if he had." "You're right, it's not. I'm just going to make it clear to you all. I won't be helping to awaken any of Ropus' believers. Since you're no longer a part of the discussion, you might as well leave." The god's fibrous jaw hung open, looking shocked and outraged and completely at a loss to be spoken to like that. All while the golem-like god who'd initially been leading things went to take back control. "All right, why don't we all just quiet down and try to be reasonable with each other? Apostle Ben, I believe you can see why your request would raise some tensions." They actually have someone who knows how to be chill to lead things. Cool. Still gotta make things clear. I'd say I'm being perfectly reasonable when you consider my history with the lot of you. I know we haven't always been on the best of terms, what with all of you bringing me to the world and forgetting me when I wasn't immediately useful, some of you having people in your faiths that would actively harm me, your gross neglect in the barest amount of checking who runs the cultural center of religion getting me tossed into the dead god's trial, some of you wanting to toss me into hell just because I have a few skill levels you don't like. And then who can forget having the gall to let your people try and pull me into your nations despite that? But let's ignore that and focus on the here and now. Despite all of that, I came here to negotiate the sale of my services, but I'm under no obligation to help anyone who threatens my existence. If he has any believers who want to convert away from him, then after we get all of this sorted out, I'll help them like any other. But other than that, too bad, so sad. Better luck next time. This isn't about trading services, a different goddess said, looking mostly tired, as if she'd been waiting for things to turn sour the entire time, while still trying to be reasonable. "This is for the good of the planet. Can you not just help because it's right? That is all we're asking of you despite our differing positions. Giving you what you want would cost us faith, but it costs you nothing." "Well, it's cute that you think my time is worth nothing," he said dryly before giving a long sigh. "And as for any different positions, let's make one thing clear. Our relationship isn't between God and believer. It's between a service provider and customer. I have what you all want, so you all need to provide proper compensation for it. Like any transaction, there's room to negotiate. In fact, I was fully expecting to until you all decided to act like assholes instead. However, if any of you insist on acting unreasonably, then I have no obligation to spend my time on you. I get that we're worried about the end of the world, but I'm a craftsman first and foremost. I do work, I get paid. It's as simple as that." He could already see some wanting to argue and put up a hand to silence them at the same time as the god who was supposed to be leading the negotiation before going on. "Listen, the reason we're having issues is because when you look at me, you're seeing someone below you. I know you all manage to work together to an extent, so the problem is that even if you love your mortals, you can't see them as people worth sharing a relationship of equals with. I don't care how you treat the rest of them, but for me that changes here and now. I am not less than any of you, and if you insist on acting like it, then this will go nowhere. So do you want to negotiate what my services are worth, or shall I just leave?" Another eruption of conversation that seemed like it would go nowhere. Ben gave up, forcing his mind out of the realm he found himself in and back down below as he sat up, rubbing his head before focusing on everyone around him. There were obvious questioning looks wondering what exactly had just happened, and he was about to give the highlights when a new notification rang out in his mind. "Allow." The last time he'd left a meeting being held by so many gods his mind had flooded with notifications, but this time it ended with just one. He couldn't deny his curiosity and got to enjoy the feeling of it being rewarded as the golem-like god spoke in his head. Ben was all but humming during dinner, still feeling the change in himself and just how worthwhile it had been going back. The meeting when he'd returned had drastically shrunk in size as the gods had decided that having everyone there was doing nothing but creating an unproductive atmosphere. Instead, they grouped up their opinions together and selected a representative for each one, leaving him with only 6 gods other than the ones he was directly familiar with to talk to and work things out, with the negotiation ending better for him than he could have hoped. The meeting ended without him getting a single blessing, but that hadn't really been what he had been hoping for. Sure, if he managed to get enough of them, then he could have potentially reached some excellent heights by the time the second wave was going to come, but he knew from the start that he'd never get to that point. No, what he wanted was something more immediately useful to him, without having to go to the effort of gaining it himself. He wanted more mana. Some might think it was a silly desire, given that he'd gained the ability to use what others had, but he didn't see it like that. He couldn't just constantly use someone else's mana for his spells and work, or else it would kill his growth rates in those areas, leaving him stagnating, and that wasn't to mention other disadvantages. Aside from the moderate discomfort to extreme pain he would go through from receiving anyone's mana like that, it was also only useful if there was anyone around to take from. There were always going to be times he'd be alone and just want to work. Increasing his quantity would be plenty helpful in those instances. Exceptionally helpful even. I was expecting to be talked down to around 200, so ending on 250 worked out exceptionally well. Finally broke into the thousands and got my Regan raised to match. Life is good. Considering that Jagal had once raised his mana by 5 on a whim for making her a statue for the Dryads, along with the growth he'd received after the Dead God's trial, he knew that raising a person's mana wasn't the hardest of things for a god to do. He had still expected to be talked down, of course, with the gods coming off as thoroughly penny-pinching, but by the time they realized that he wasn't actually going to insist on receiving a bunch of blessings for his work, they had become significantly more agreeable. Not to mention the added bonuses that they'll be sending an awakened skill holder to me for every person I awaken, along with every gray and human on the planet, so I can make skill rings. Man, oh man, life is going to be good. Ben, you're drooling, Thera chimed in, pulling him from his thoughts and back to dinner as he wiped his mouth. Sorry. Just thinking about how good it is to be alive, and all of the fun stuff I'm going to be making. So think you guys will stick around All Faith till it's time then? Jake asked. It looks like our tower challenging is being put on pause for this too, so we'll have a bit of extra time if you want to keep meeting up for meals. It was going to be a few days before Ben began his work helping the 8th level magic holders of the world awaken, for the sole fact that they'd need to all be gathered and brought to All Faith, giving them each some time before things got hectic, with the world's 2 soul mages dragged in to help too. While it normally wasn't frequent that a person could plan their awakening to such an extent, both Yuzu and Elvit were about to receive an overwhelming level of practice for any spells related to such a thing, basically having no choice in the matter but to put their skills to use. Ben had offered to help both of them negotiate literally anything for their work, but both had declined, which is absolutely their loss. I'd be down for some dinners, Ben agreed, but I was thinking that while I'm here I'd see about taking the test for the other library floors, unless you have anything else you want to be doing? He asked, focusing on Thera. That works for me. I wouldn't mind spending a bit more time there anyway. Boring, Jake moaned. Why do you want to be spending your time studying? Life could end up being way too short. You've got to go out and have some fun. It looked like he was going to go on, but Vasta silenced him with a quick strike to the back of his head. You could stand to learn a thing or two from the both of them, she told him sternly. If it weren't for your position, you'd have never gotten access to the 4th floor, and here you are wasting it. When's the last time you did any reading? I mean, as long as I keep challenging the tower's dash. Another smack silenced him. The goal is getting you to the 3rd tier. You're a mage, even if you're capable of the technical skill. It's meaningless if you don't have the knowledge to go with it. Gods above, to think this would be my first apprentice. Vasta, there's no helping it, Amy sighed. He's an idiot, he can't be fixed. He really does seem to resist any attempt to be turned into an upstanding citizen. Yuliel agreed, casting a pitying look to both Amy and Yuzu. The skills he has really are wasted on him. All right, I wasn't using my feelings anyway, Jake grumbled as Yuzu tried to console him. So how hard is the test for the next 2 floors anyway? Ben asked, changing the topic out of pity towards his friend. Overwhelmingly, Yuliel told him plainly. You need a deep understanding of magic as a whole, and while you get a bit of selection to choose from, the questions are going to change each time, so you can't really prepare at all. Of course, things might get a bit complicated for you, Vasta went on. Usually you can choose the branch of magic you want the questions to be aimed at, but given how rare the ones that made up your material manipulation were, and that enchanting is typically treated more as the domain of craftsmen than the magic it is, you might be asked to pick another branch, especially if none of the ones you practice have any material on the higher floors. Huh. Yeah, I can see that being a problem, he muttered. I'd be shocked if there's anything on Awakened Destruction or Material User variants on the higher floors, even if I might have some stuff for enchanting. Not that it matters though. I'm comfortable with the majority of magic at this point, so it sounds like it will be fun. Past you is crying Ben, Jake told him, shaking his head. Tests are never supposed to be fun. Ha! Learning is plenty fun so long as you're learning something you enjoy, and the more I know about magic, the more I can enchant. Can do. He ignored Jake's continued grumbling, instead choosing to look forward to what was to come. Even if he didn't know what he'd be getting out of any higher floors, that just made him want to get to whatever secrets they had for himself. Which means I might need to do a day of hardcore studying if I can. MMH, or maybe I'll just risk it. I want to get this done as fast as I can to get up there. I have the knowledge, so why should I wait for anything? I'm afraid you'll have to wait about a week and a half, the librarian told him apologetically. The head librarian is out right now, but I can schedule a time for when they're back if that works for you? Sure, sounds good. He felt himself deflate with the news, but there was nothing he could do about it. So instead he just gave his thanks and submitted the report Myriad asked him to before going to wander the many shelves. You sure you don't want to take the test yourself? He asked Thera as she was looking around, trying to see where to read. It seems like a decent opportunity since we're here. MMH, maybe I'll give it a go in the future. But you're obviously going to pass, so just make copies of anything that seems interesting for me after. I'm not a printing press. Aren't you? I'm not sure if I'm going to take that as a compliment. So anyway, which floor do you think you'll focus on today? Thera asked him while she was still deciding for herself, using whatever he'd picked to help make up her mind. I'm thinking 3rd. If I'm trying to go up a couple, then it would make sense I'd be tested on the highest one I can currently reach, right? Makes sense. In that case, I'm going to the 2nd if you need me. I doubt I'd be able to get much reading done on the same one as you given how you're going to be drawing attention. What's that supposed to mean? She looked at him quietly, trying to see if he was being serious before sighing and kissing his cheek, not giving him an answer. I'll grab you for lunch in a couple hours, so just try not to disturb anyone else reading. Okay? Seriously, what's that supposed to mean? I'm a perfectly quiet reader. Mouse-like in my dedication to it. Completely unnoticeable. Not even remotely distracting. He told himself all of that and more as he got to the 3rd floor before standing in front of the nearest shelf, holding out his hand to let his magic flow through his as books flew out of it. 25 lined up before him as pages fluttered past his eyes before he put them back and moved on to the next set. The sound of paper being quiet yet filling the space with its sheer volume as the few others on that floor turned to stare. None of them actually believing that what he was doing was reading as he moved to the next shelf after only a few minutes. What reading in silence? Excuse you, I'm still incredibly human, minus however the demon organs are changing me and how my minds have changed. Shush now, no yelling in the library. If he was going to honestly look at himself, he had to admit he understood what his god was saying. Reading so many books at once wasn't exactly normal, and what was worse was that he wasn't even reaching his full potential. The only reason he wasn't reading more wasn't due to the limits of any skill or amount of mana. It was because of his eyes and the space around him. The shelves were packed tight enough that he couldn't step back to give himself more room to read more at once. And even if he could, no matter how good his vision had grown thanks to the combination of different skills, none of the skills he had were specifically dedicated to vision either. which means I should add vision enhancement to the list of skills I want to pay Zandale to acquire and then teach me after. Well, not Zandale since I think he would need eyes to get it, but maybe one of his apprentices. Then I'd be able to do even more. No, I'm going to become even more efficient at what I do. Sure I am. I'm a machine that turns knowledge into cool magic toys. That makes me the best sort of machine, really. He kept bantering with Myriad as he read, going from shelf to shelf as hundreds of books were finished in minutes, only stopping as he felt a tap on his shoulder. It's not time for lunch yet, is it? But when he turned, it wasn't Thera standing at his side, but a librarian, looking unusually stern for no explainable reason. Hello, sir. They began, trying to be professional but mostly coming off as annoyed. If you have access to the third floor, we ask that you don't just play around and instead take your time here seriously. I am, though? He asked, unable to keep the questioning tone from his voice as pages kept turning for the few books in his field of view. It obviously wasn't the reaction the librarian wanted, shaking their head as some of their professionalism slipped, letting the annoyance sneak through. What part of this is taking things seriously? Ugh, fine. I'm aware of how this looks, but I just happen to be very good at reading is all, he explained, trying to keep up a friendly atmosphere. I have a few skills that make it easy to go through a few books at once, and a magic that lets me flip through multiple pages instead of being stuck with whatever my hands can do. I assure you, I'm taking my time reading here as seriously as one can. This is just me getting the most out of it. MMH? The librarian hummed through pursed lips, not believing him in the slightest before going to pull a book from the shelf that he'd already finished. In that case, I don't suppose you'd mind sharing your thoughts on this one with me? It was one they'd read before and not light by any stretch, but when they pulled it out, Ben's eyes lit up. Oh, that was an interesting one. I don't do too much work with fire magic compared to some other branches, but to have a comprehensive volume comparing how the awakened magic could be combined with other unawakened branches isn't something you get to see a lot of. I think my personal favorite part started at page 45 and was discussing how the level of control an awakened fire mage should possess lends itself nicely when paired with an unawakened life magic, letting the caster manipulate a subject's body temperature to enhance the healing process. Of course, it's easy to see the more violent subtext hidden in that too. If a person's body temperature is being manipulated with life magic, then there's all sorts of nefarious, torturous things that could be done as well. Not that you need to worry about that from me. I'm no fire mage. Right, well? At a loss from the sudden spiel, they flipped through to the page he said, finding he'd been exactly right yet not stopping, letting themselves be swept away by the feeling that he'd just gotten lucky and pulled out another. What about this one then? Oh, that, he asked, barely giving it a glance before going back to flipping through the books he still had hanging out in the air. Boring. Derivative. It goes deeper into what an awakened fire and earth magic could do in tandem, but it doesn't go beyond what the unawakened versions of the skills can do together. Honestly, it would feel like a waste of space being on the third floor, but it seems like the author at least did a good job of taking measurements of temperature, mana cost, and earth densities in the areas they were testing in. The graphs in the back are at least worth your time if you've already read other books on the subject. Again they flipped through them and again they found he was right, yet that only stroked their competitive spirit as more books were pulled from shelves to test him on. Surely they were just getting the ones he'd actually looked at or had some past experience with. It's what they told themselves with each following correct answer as they were slowly being beaten by the truth of the matter, all while Ben barely noticed. He just kept up his reading as he did, with enough minds free to think of what he and Myriad had been talking about before the interruption. If I'm being limited by my body, isn't there a way I can beat that? Without getting any new skills to help? And doesn't it just so happen that I'm dating the perfect person to help me with exactly what I'm thinking? I'll bring it up with Thera over lunch. It seems like it would be good practice for her too. So, did you find anything good in the library? He asked as they ate, enjoying what a nearby cafe had to offer just outside the gigantic library. An interesting book on combining my dark magic with my earth. A lot of the suggestions involved using it the same way I would my earth healing spell, making it so a given area will keep debuffing anyone in it, or doing something like filling an area with a fear effect to keep animals and people away, so either of those could be handy. Other than that, I read up a bit on non-affinity magic since I'm trying to get it, but I think I might just talk to Vasta a bit more about it next time we see her. How about you? Well, I got through a bunch dash. How many thousands is a bunch? 13 thousands, and there were plenty of interesting things, but nothing shockingly so, you know? Like, I learned things, but nothing as useful as some of the stuff I already knew. Also, people kept coming up to test me, and it got annoying after a bit. After the first librarian gave up, a second had come, followed by a few patrons reading around him not long after. It wasn't like he particularly minded or anything, but none of them had even bothered discussing any of the books he'd read so much as they were just making sure he'd actually read them. He gained nothing from the exchange, other than his girlfriend's laughter as he told her about it. I knew something like this was going to happen, she giggled, feeling clearly validated. I absolutely knew it. Nobody would look at the way you read and take it seriously, Ben. You must realize that, right? I don't realize anything, he insisted stubbornly. It's not my fault the world is prejudiced against efficiency. It's not, it's insanity it has a problem with. Boo, one day this whole planet will come to realize the superiority of being many-minded, and when that day comes my circlets are going to be flying off the shelves. Flying, I tell you. Ha! It's nice to have hopes and dreams. It makes you cute, she teased. I'm always cute. Hell, I'm downright adorable. And changing the topic a bit, this cute little guy has an itty-bitty favor to ask you. And I'm immediately suspicious. That hurts me deeply. It was yesterday I watched you ask someone a favor that ended with them becoming the high priestess of your god. Valeria is in Satchel's excellent hands now. She'll be fine. Anyway, I was hoping I could talk you into doing something for me. My suspicion is only growing, Ben. Just tell me already. I was hoping you could make me a few homunculi to use. It was an idea heavily inspired by the fourth floor of the Life Tower when he'd been forced to make use of the ones it provided, along with getting to see all of the benefits there was to get from it. His immediate goal for getting such a thing was to use it to read even more. If he could see out the eyes of 2 or 3 homunculi, he would be able to multiply the amount of books he could read by that much as well, but there was another benefit to be had too. He'd already seen in the tower that if he was connected to a homunculus then he could gain skills through the act, and while he didn't have any in mind he wanted to get from them, it did imply that the training he did while using them would help raise his job and skill levels as well. Because of the change to his mind, he could do so much, but that left his limiting factor being his single body. A limit he was looking to change. He explained all of this to Thera, watching as she listened attentively, all while the look on her face became more and more concerned. You really are trying to become something entirely not mortal at this point, aren't you? I'm trying to use and grow my skills to their full potential, that's all. What's so weird about that? I mean, I guess compared to the way you think, not much. All right. I'm not sure if I'll succeed, but I'll give it a try. With lunch done, they did a quick shopping trip, Thera running around to grab the simple supplies they'd need as Ben carried them all, filling bags upon bags with one thing in particular. Meat. His high strength left the task being easy enough for him, and he couldn't help but feel excited. Even if the homunculi she made would have to be close by for him to use, he was already envisioning how handy they'd be when he got back to Stonewall, basically having a small team he could use when making things, letting him do more and faster too. He was on the first step of a breakthrough, he could feel it. Once everything was gathered, they found an area at the edge of the city that was open to the public for the express purpose of training magics. Finding examples of all sorts being fired off as the residents of the magic towers practiced, each person trying to fiddle with their spells to refine what they could do, many in big, flash ways, all while Thera prepared to attempt something that at first glance would look far more humble while in reality being significantly more complex. The sack of meat was placed on the ground, sitting at a bit over half of Ben's mass as she stared at it in deep concentration, muttering to herself as she did. Okay, I'll just need to start the base here and then get more to continue it after, but this will be fine. Let's see. Ben, can you give me your knife? Sure. Take it, he told her, handing it over without any fuss. Great. Now give me your hand. I immediately have concerns. Don't be a baby. I just need some of your flesh and blood. And my concerns are raised. Why? Homunculi are typically made from a more standard living base, she explained. The more complex ones my aunt makes combine different ones to get the result she wants, but I can just make you one that will match your body, which will be a lot easier anyway. Now come on. I literally watched you stab yourself twice in the tower. This is nothing. He wanted to comment that any extent of getting stabbed was never nothing, but held it back. He'd made this request of her. He would see it through to its end and held out his hand, feeling the sharp sting of the blade take 2 deep cuts across his arm, carving out a chunk of flesh as blood poured out into Thera's empty hand before she healed him and focused on what she had. Okay, so if I remember right, I'm just altering the base and making it grow, she muttered to herself before she started, the area around them filling with her excess life magic as nearby mages were quick to notice, feeling sensitive to the change in the area and looking around to try and figure out exactly what was going on as she worked, only to come to a sudden stop, looking sheepish as she did. It looks like I'll need to take more. She was already reaching out again with the knife, and Ben forced himself to keep from jumping back. I asked for this, he told himself, not sure he liked the determined look coming to her eyes as she cut into him again. At least I keep it nice and sharp. So what exactly went wrong with the first bit? I used too much life mana and destroyed the cells. Now quiet for a second. This is a delicate spell, so I need to concentrate. And I suddenly feel like I'll be bleeding out today. Well, as long as she keeps healing me after, it should be fine. Paying no mind to the thoughts going through his head, Thera directed her focus to her hand, cupping flesh along with warm, red blood. She didn't have much particular interest in such an aspect of life magic, finding the process distasteful, but she didn't want to admit defeat, so she honed her mana, making it invade Ben's severed cells as they clung to their last bit of life and worked to alter them, feeling the flesh shiver and warp in her hand, taking up the loose blood as it grew into a small, pulsing sphere. It was only once she felt confident that it wouldn't die that she dropped it into the ground meat, and they both watched as it began taking it in, basically eating and growing, all directed under Thera's power as features began to take shape. As mass left the pile and went to it, the look changed from that of a strange, fleshy blob to something almost like a head. Thin hairs were beginning to sprout out of it, but more distinct than that was the split that formed in its center, a jaw coming into being and teeth sprouting, all to help it eat more. The visual of it was disgusting, even if he wasn't going to say it, but it looked like it was working, and he felt the thrill running through him to see it, the future he was envisioning becoming so close, only to fall flat at the end as the jaw locked open and flesh began convulsing before the raw meat was ejected, and it fell flat, lifeless at the end. The two of them just stared at it, neither having enjoyed what they'd seen, even if one of them was filled with a renewed determination by the failure. Well, at least we'll be able to use what already grew as a source of food for the next attempt, so nothing's going to waste. She spoke positively, already pointing the knife at him for another go. So try not to wiggle too much. I'm sure it won't be too long till I get it. So, is Ben okay? Pelania asked over dinner, watching as he shakily shoveled greens into his mouth, all while Thera kept healing him from the side. Just a little anemic is all, he told her, giving an unsteady thumbs up as Thera blushed and apologized again. I'm sorry. I guess I just kind of lost myself there. It's fine, it's fine. I asked for it after all. The day ended with dozens of failures, not one viable homunculus to their name, with all either of them had to show for it being Ben's newfound lack of blood, which translated to a lack of energy as his body was struggling to keep up with its demands. Given that, there hadn't been much point in going back to the library when he so desperately needed to replace his body's reserves, and being near a gate was the perfect excuse to impose on her family's hospitality, taking advantage of the fact that they had a chef on hand to ensure he could keep chowing down, all while Thera's mother laughed from the side. You know, I'd much prefer to hear about a different activity my daughter might been doing to wear on your body dash. MOM. Really? Stabbings are the sort of thing you expect at the end of a relationship, not in the middle of a healthy one, Pelania sighed, acting like she didn't hear her daughter's objections. Stabbing, 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 came the sing-song voice of another at the table, the toddler Saren, as Lux rubbed her child's head. Now, don't go learning anything strange from your aunt or cousin, okay? Most people don't stab anyone they love. The young half-spirit nodded, bursting into a fit of giggles as Thera only sunk deeper into her seat, not knowing how to handle being teased from both sides while Pelenia enjoyed the show. Ah, but enough about endings. Ben, Falk happened to come here with a very, very interesting letter. I don't suppose you can guarantee that wasn't a lie, right? I don't think either of you will like the result of getting my hopes up. If it was a lie, then I'll kill him before you can. Falk promised me he would, and I just got finished dealing with almost dying in the Life Tower to make sure your sister would be confident enough to actually talk to him. I am getting the happy ending I want for everyone, even if it means working myself to the bone for it. Humph. Well, next time make sure you find a scheme to help me awaken something, she told him, switching to a pout. Do you know what Sonia did as soon as you left her? Went back to Stonewall with Sakhel? No. She came here to brag. Give it a few decades and I'll be looking older than her now. Can you believe that? I refuse to let this stand. Not the complaint I was expecting, but okay. Also not what I would expect from Sonia. I guess it's that sisterly bound. No, this is definitely some sort of payback, isn't it? It's not like she never complains about how much stress Pelenia would put her through back in their adventurer days. Well, if I ever think of anything, it wouldn't hurt to be in my potential mother-in-law's good books. He had a decent grasp of her skills, the same he did for anyone he'd get close enough to check, but she didn't have anything that stood out as a way that would be a path to awakening. It wasn't like she wasn't skilled at anything. She even surprisingly had a couple of 7th-level ones, but nothing in any magic he might help with. Well, that's a future problem. So how's Uncle Falk doing with his project anyway? Thera asked, escaping her embarrassment with the change of topic. It's already been a while. And will be a while longer, her mother sighed. I have your father out seeing him most days, helping to either materialize for him as he works or else dealing with some of the heavy lifting. But the rest is all him. Really, just why does he have to be so stubborn with his goal? The old ape should just talk to my sister and worry about the rest later instead of making her wait even longer. Humph. They're both such a handful. Mother, both of them would hit you if they heard you saying that. Boo. Just keep healing your fiancé and try not to feel stabby with any of the cutlery on the table, Pelenia told her, sticking out her tongue as Thera blushed more, looking between her and Ben before focusing back on his healing. Right, I guess now that we're dating that makes the whole forced engagement a bit more complicated, doesn't it? Thera would never want to give her mother that sort of win. Gasp. Myriad, are you saying marrying me would be winning in life? Oh, you sweetheart, you must be buttering me up into doing some work. Ben couldn't help but tease, feeling good despite himself. It was simply nice to enjoy a meal amongst people he liked and cared about. He couldn't help but enjoy the time before he was going to be put to who knew how much work. Well, hopefully I get a couple levels out of it to make it worthwhile as an extra little bonus. Either way, it should be interesting. Staying late to continue chatting with everyone. The two opted to stay the night, sleeping in the next day before they finally awakened to go down and leave, finding one more who hadn't been there the night before. Auntie Funa, it's great to see you. Did you just get in? Thera asked her, giving the great dark spirit a wide smile. Oh, I was just a gate away, so Lux asked me to come by as backup. Backup? Given how things went with Vividus last time, I thought we might join you, Lux explained, continuing after taking in the confused looks both Ben and Thera were giving. Ah, did I perhaps assume wrong? I thought that since you didn't have any luck with your homunculus creation you'd be going to her next. But if you aren't. Instantly, Ben was shooting Thera his most hopeful face as she rubbed her temples, knowing that even if that hadn't been the plan, the idea was now firmly rooted in his mind. She literally held you hostage last time we were there, Ben. Yeah. But it looks like this time we'll have your very strong, very cool aunts to keep us safe. Please? Pretty please. Fine, she sighed, only giving in so easily for the fact that her family would be there. But if she tries to kill you again, you're not allowed to be upset about it. I mean, I don't think I was particularly upset about it last time either though. True, in that case, if she tries to do anything you actually have to get upset this time. He gave her a winning smile before the four of them made their way to the gate. Visiting Vividus hadn't even crossed his mind, but it was a clear solution to his goal. He knew the great life spirit could expertly make homunculi with the same degree of skill that she could carry out any application of life magic, and her residence was filled with examples of how well she managed such a thing. And the fact that she was willing to kill me to motivate Thera's growth was admittedly not ideal, but it's not good to hold grudges. Absolutely not. Do you have any idea how much I make each time one falls? Plus, I'm still not over that attempted assassination. Hell, both attempted assassinations. I'm such a sweet little delicate flower. Why do people keep wanting to step on me? What can I say? I'm a very resourceful, delicate flower. Relax, Myriad. My greatest skill of all is my ability to stay alive. The fact that I'm still here to torment you is proof enough. His god sighed in his head, getting the last word in before they stepped foot through the gate, re-entering the Life Valley.